across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company on the Evening Exchange this evening. You've probably just heard an alert on your phone. We've all heard it here in the studio and in our offices. We were wondering what it was, but the UK government has issued a severe alert because of the very high risk of wildfires nationally. It says, I'm just reading it off my phone here, residents, landowners and visitors should not undertake any activity that could start a fire, including disposable barbecues, fire pits, garden incinerators or fireworks. Even a small flame can rapidly develop into a major wildfire, placing lives, homes, businesses and emergency responders at risk. Follow official updates and report signs of fire immediately by calling 999, search gov.uk/alerts for more information. I must say I was slightly wondering what was going on there, but that is one of these government alerts that's coming to lots of people's phones, almost everyone's phone actually. We'll talk as well about Clacton, of course, and what has happened there. Nigel Farage, a very convincing victory, 63+%, but Count Binface got around 27%. Lots of other smaller candidates losing their deposits, £16,000 worth of deposits gone. What does Nigel Farage do now? Where is he in his positioning? And could there be another by-election before too long? We'll talk about all of that. Also, the Prime Minister has been talking about that barbecue ban just before that alert went off there. Lots as well about Edwina Curry and her comments last night, dominating our programme with her suggestion that prostitutes should be allowed into places like Piddington in Oxfordshire. We have a prostitute herself, a sex worker, I would imagine she would like to be called, Lola, who has been in touch, and I will read you her message from her perspective on that story too. Whatever you'd like to say, however you'd like to say it, please do give me a shout, 0344 499 1000. And on the fires, of course, we will speak to an expert on those. We'll be continuing our coverage on that and the fact that these wildfires are completely out of control in so many different places. There are casualties, there are all sorts of things. Also, the message we've just had, you know, what do you make of that? Do you think that's a reasonable thing for the government to do? Is that overreach? What about older people? What about people in a crowded pub or restaurants? We were wondering what on earth was going on, actually. It was just a sort of, well, we were alert as we were meant to be, but if it's going off on, you know, hundreds of phones in a pub or something like that, is that the right way to communicate with people? And that is, you know, we all know this is happening. Is that the right way to communicate? Is that a frequency that you would sort of support, essentially? Because I don't think there are too many people who don't know there are wildfires going on. It is a way to get advice to people, but should it be done in that way? Some people might have been worried about that or confused or even terrified. Is this how we live under the new Burnham government? Let me know your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, you can send me a WhatsApp voice message, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 9 o'clock this evening, so stay with me here on the Evening Exchange, here on Talk. Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch already. I will get to those calls, text, tweets and voice notes in a moment. But first of all, I just want to talk about what the Prime Minister has said on a potential barbecue ban. Let's hear from the Prime Minister and what he has said today.
The temporary ban on barbecues, disposable barbecues, comes in today. All retailers will be receiving notification of that ban, and we ask them to obviously implement it in full until further notice, when we can remove it. And then I would also want to say to the public, you can see what's happening. 37 significant fires across England and Wales. Please do not light an open fire, a bonfire of any kind. If you're disposing of a cigarette, take great care. This is obviously a really combustible situation, literally, and you know we need to respect that fact and make sure that no one is taking any risk, because you're taking risk with other people's homes, with other people's lives if you act recklessly.
I'm a bit confused. He seems to be asking retailers not to sell them. That's not a ban. But anyway, we'll continue. We'll go to that point in just a second. And there is a temporary ban, apparently, on barbecues, disposable barbecues. Yes, it comes in today. All the retailers receiving notification of the ban and asking them to implement it in full, as he says there. Right then, well, let's talk about Clacton, because our intrepid reporter and Jackie O lookalike with those sunnies earlier on today, Samara Gill, is back. How you doing?
Great, thank you. Yes, the Jackie O of Clacton. I don't know.
I'm sure it's Hyannis Port next for you. How was it? I mean, what are your impressions of what has been happening over the past 24 hours? Because Nigel Farage got pretty testy with a few people, as did Lee Anderson. In fact, just before I get your opinion on that, let's hear what Lee Anderson said about the security situation. This is him talking to the BBC this morning.
Is it true that Mr. Farage was notified, as he said he was, by Essex Police of a security threat?
Well, Nigel said during his speech, he said he'd been told not to turn up because there could have been, a bit of bother there within, inside the county and all. So he's took the advice, and I think he's done the right thing. And like I say, Charlie, I think his time is better spent saying a massive thank you to the hundreds of people, the thousands of people that's turned up over the past month to help him secure this historic victory.
Understood. Essex Police, BBC understands, say they didn't advise anyone not to attend.
Yeah. Well, sometimes some of these police forces that we've been dealing with recently are about as honest as you lot at the BBC.
Okay, so you're saying that Essex Police, that they're not telling it how it is when they say that there was no advice to your party leader not to attend?
I've not spoken to Nigel about this. I've not spoken to Essex Police. If Nigel gets up on stage and says that he's been advised not to attend the event, then I believe Nigel above the police and especially above you lot at the BBC.
So there we are. Clearly, Lee Anderson, the chairman of Reform UK, not happy. There have been conflicting reports about this. What's the truth, Samara?
Look, there is a massive bust-up now between Essex Police and Reform. That's what's going on. I think the truth honestly lies with Essex Police. They said that there was no threat, and they're claiming, of course, Reform is claiming that there was one, and that's according to Nigel's private security. Now, I can see why there are problems here. There's massive mistrust, especially after the murder of Anne Widdecombe, which obviously we can't go into. It's an open case, but there is massive mistrust in what the police has been saying. I think there is more that will come out in the coming months about counter-terrorism police, the Metropolitan Police, etc., and the way that they've dealt with certain aspects of threats towards Reform UK politicians. But, I think that this is the issue that Reform is having time and time again, where they can't get a succinct party line to put out to everyone. You can see that with actually what happened going back to Clacton, where Nigel couldn't get his ducks in a row when he was explaining where the £5 million gift donation came from. And you had other people coming out from his party saying it came from, he can use it for whatever he likes. Then he was saying he's going to use it for Ferraris on talk. Then he was saying it was for security. So they need to get a line together, even when they're dealing with things as serious as this, because by all accounts, he was at the field for Farage Fest last night. That's where he announced his victory, and that's where, as well, he claimed that he was going to celebrate it because he didn't want to go to the count, which happened at around 7 a.m. because it took so long to count all the various candidates, 34 of them that had run. So it is really interesting, but I think I have to believe the police on this one, honestly, and I think that the security question is going to come up time and time again, and will Reform use and abuse it? That's kind of what the question is at the moment.
Just stay where we are for a second. I want to go to Alex Wilson, who is a London Assembly member for Reform UK. Clearly, Nigel Farage has done well. He got over 60%. There was quite a high turnout. He's increased his majority, and well done to him. Are you concerned that a novelty candidate got 27% against him, Alex?
Well, you can only play against who else is on the pitch, and to their eternal discredit and disgrace, the Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dems, Greens and Restore all chose not to participate in this by-election, fundamentally because they're cowards and they knew they would have got a trouncing. So that left the way open for a novelty candidate, in some people's words, to be the kind of lightning rod for opposition to Nigel. And that's fine. Yeah, it's democracy. It's an election. There is no such thing as a fake election. That's what Kemi's tried to call it. It's not a fake election. A vacancy has been created and it has to be filled by people voting. And the really, really important thing that happened on Thursday in this constituency is that more people came out to vote, notwithstanding, in fact, lower turnout than at the general election, as you normally get with a by-election. It's a lower turnout. But notwithstanding that, more people, individual people, came out, raw votes, to vote for Nigel than had voted for him in the general election. That shows what his constituents think of him. And that's why he called this by-election, to show, to ask his constituents, the people he represents, the people he loves, the people he works for on a daily basis, ask them what they think about his record. They spoke in their thousands yesterday, and they re-elected him with a bigger vote share, a bigger raw number.
But he hasn't moved on in any way. I mean, he's back in Parliament, and as I say, congratulations for winning the by-election. But what does it actually mean? What does it actually show? I mean, you're saying they've got a ringing endorsement of him. They didn't really have anybody else to vote for apart from 33 largely novelty candidates. We've got the re-establishment now of that parliamentary investigation, and in theory there could be another by-election coming up very soon. The whole thing will cost nearly £1 million of taxpayers' money.
Well, we offered as Reform to pay tendering district councils.
That's never going to happen, Alex. You can't have parliament. You can't have political parties paying for elections like that. That is ludicrous.
Look, it's not ludicrous. We made an offer in good faith.
It is ludicrous. If any other party paid for Alex, if any other party paid for an election which is meant to be free, fair, and impartially run, you would be jumping out of your skin saying how ludicrous it was.
Cost of the Greater Manchester mayoral by-election runs into millions. Perhaps Labour should have offered to pay for that, as that was
no, they shouldn't have.
Because Burnham stood and became MP for Makerfield. But look, what would be ridiculous and ludicrous and a complete waste of taxpayers' money would be calling a second by-election. We got a very clear, resounding result yesterday. And if the Conservatives and Labour and the members of that committee want to stitch it up and force a recall petition and with that a second by-election, that would be the real ludicrous waste of public money. We've shown that the number of people that voted for Nigel yesterday, he will beat off all comers in that constituency, and the fact that the Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dems and Greens didn't have the courage to stand yesterday, it speaks volumes for what they really think their chances are. So
what should happen if Daniel Greenberg, who is the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, if he finds against Nigel Farage and the process happens that there could in theory be a recall petition, that is something that's up to those constituents in Clacton, isn't it? So you're saying it's ludicrous that should happen, but that's the procedure that every parliamentarian knows about if they're found against. I'm not saying Mr Farage will or will not be found against, but what should happen if he is found against by Daniel Greenberg? What should happen then, Alex?
Well, those are the rules, that's the procedure, and then we'll see what happens. But it would be activists representing those other legacy parties that would be doing the collection of those signatures, encouraging people to go and sign. I honestly don't think after the result yesterday, I don't think that 10% of the constituents would off their own back go and sign a petition, because we saw what the people of Clacton think of Nigel. They voted for him in ever greater numbers, and they did vote Reform in massive numbers in the local elections just a few weeks ago, where we won every division that covers the constituency of Clacton. So that's what the people of Clacton think. If there's a second by-election, well, we'll go and fight that with exactly the same vigour and resource and enthusiasm and energy as we fought this one. I was there quite a lot during the campaign because it's just up the road from where I live. In fact, I grew up in the neighbouring constituency. It's a part of Essex that I know very, very well indeed. I spent a lot of time there during the campaign, and I loved every minute of it. The weather was great. The people were even better. Alex, and if there's a second by-election, we'll do it all over again, and we'll win by just the same margin. And
you'll have a lot of data that you have gained from that election, which I'm sure will make your tally men very, very happy. Just before we go, Alex, I don't know if you received this alert from the government about the wildfires just at 7 o'clock. Did that come through on your mobile phone?
My phone's actually upstairs, so I'm downstairs.
You didn't hear the alert?
I haven't. If I did receive it, I haven't heard it.
Not to worry. I was just going to ask you about it, but not to worry, Alex. If you haven't seen it, it's just something that's happened in the last few minutes. I thought you might have an opinion on, but not to worry. Alex, thanks for joining us this evening. I appreciate that. You must be knackered off the by-election, so I do appreciate that. That's Alex Wilson, London Assembly member for Reform UK. Samara Gill is with me, fresh from Clacton. I just wonder, Samara, what you think of this alert that's gone out. I mean, to me, it seems pretty nanny state. We're being told there are wildfires. We know. I mean, this kind of power that the government has to get to everybody's mobile phone has to be used very, very sparingly and should be for really, really urgent, worrying things. Some people will say, well, it is urgent, it is worrying, it is an emergency, but actually, was that a good use of that alert 15 minutes ago? What do you think?
No, it was deeply unsettling, and honestly, it's outrageous that the government would use and abuse their power like this. We need to be really, really critical of governments that are constantly using fear in order to control their citizens. And it does feel like this is some sort of new dawn on Burnham's government, where he's talking, I mean, we're talking about hot weather and fires. And as an Australian, that's not an emergency in my view. We have them all the time. You know, yes, a couple of people do die, and that is absolutely terrible. But this type of thing should be used for a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean?
We were here. I know you were in the control room, and we were all thinking, what's going on? Is this a fire alert? Is this a building telling us to get out? Are we going to have a show this evening? What's happening? I mean, imagine if this is in the area that I can see right now, behind the glass. We're talking about 6 or 7, there are 8 of us in total, including in the studio and there, and it got very, very loud in there. If you're in a train, if you're in a pub, if you're in a restaurant, it's bound to be pretty terrifying. We've already got people in touch. Elisa in Chelmsford, for example, has been in touch, and she says, I'm still shaking.
Yes, I mean, imagine if you had dementia or some sort of illness that you couldn't remember where you were, if you had, you know, major sort of confusion over what was going on. If you're a young child, you know, there are people in elderly people's homes that will have massive problems and will be experiencing very intense anxiety. I mean, the government is already shocking us into the fact that we've had the hottest summer on record, and we should all be going around, you know, making sure that we try and get to net zero and turn every air conditioner off. And I think that is part of the problem. I think there is a very dark and insidious side to this alert. You know, we are adults. Give us the information. We can take it.
And where is the adult who doesn't have that information? I mean, just looking at that alert, looking at what they've told us, who doesn't know to ring 999 if you see a fire? There's a very high risk of wildfires nationally. I mean, anybody, even someone, there are lots of very engaged viewers and listeners to this programme and to this station. I get that. Not everybody is. Some people don't know who the Prime Minister is. But who on earth would not know that the wildfires are happening? Even if you listen to a commercial radio station, you get a 90-second bulletin. It's going to be the top story. People are going to know about it, aren't they?
Exactly, and that's why I do think that there's something else behind this. I'm not trying to get tinfoil hat, but I wouldn't appreciate that the government is constantly sending us these messages. How regular are these alerts going to be? Who chooses how severe the circumstance has to be for us to all be pinged on the phone?
And I just don't want these every few minutes. You know,
that's what I'm saying.
We've got these you know, I've turned off breaking news alerts from some media organisations because they're just so frequent.
Yeah.
This is, I think, only the second or third one of these that's actually been issued. But if they're going to be every week or even once a month or something like that, people are going to take them less seriously, aren't they?
Absolutely. You know, we need to have enough of this governing through fear. We need people to just be informed. We need them to trust the government, which they don't at the moment. So why the hell are they putting this sort of stuff on our phone? It makes everyone second guess everything that's going on. I just do not agree with it. And I think none of us were warned, obviously. I know that was kind of the point of, of everyone getting pinged at the same time. But it's really blatantly irresponsible from the government to be doing this on a Friday evening when and most people have probably had a horrible sort of time at work, a long week, maybe working in the sun, working in the heat, commuting back on the tube, etc. And then to get this, I mean, honestly, if this is Burnham's government, I'm not looking forward to the rest of it.
I just don't understand why, especially as there's not a single bit of information in that I don't know. Cliff in Berkshire's been in touch and said it was very loud, Peter. I wonder if it was really just an opportunity for the gangster state to test out their new tool. Well, they did have a test a few months ago on all of this as well. And Alex says, I have a VPN on my phone, so I wasn't bothered by the nanny state message, but looked at my mother's phone. I can't believe they didn't put disposing of cigarettes on the message as well. On the barbecue ban, Martin in Lichfield says, I think this is the first step to stop our freedoms and liberties. Disposable barbecues banned. We're not stupid, Burnham. Treating us like children reminded me of the COVID madness with Boris. What about banning cigarettes, magnifying glasses and extremely hot air coming out of Burnham's mouth? That'll be a start. But the way that ridiculous alarm, it scared our dog. This is a dystopian act. What on earth is going on? It's not welcome unless you live in North Korea, says Martin. Leslie says, I agree with you both Samara and Peter. I'm not prone to worrying much, but this alert really frightened me and made me worry about my own home. I think it's appalling. So thank you for all of those points. We will get to more of them in just a minute. Thank you to Samara.
Government by alarm bell. That's what's going on.
That's it. Samara is not setting her alarm clock tomorrow. She's having a sleep in because she's been incredibly busy on the Clacton by-election. Thank you for that. I am, though, because I'm presenting Weekend Breakfast tomorrow and Sunday. I'm identifying as Mark Dolan between 6 and 10 on Saturday and Sunday, so I hope you can join me for that. We will talk more. We'll be on the debate desk with Lucy Beresford in just a second, and also Lewis Oakley will be joining us there. So stay with us here on Talk and get your call in 0344 499 1000.
He had his own Farage fest last night, which was held in a paddock about 12 miles from where I am here at the pier, and that's where he delivered his victory speech before the count came in, and some view that as deeply controversial.
He went to do a victory speech at the count. What you'd have had is 30 chumps there, all sort of screaming and shouting and heckling and, you know, making a big distraction on stage. And I think he's gone, that is not the image I want projected via national television, going out to the whole of Great Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Elle, who's been in touch and says you're right. What is behind it? Samara's right. What is behind it is the push for net zero, talking about this alert that happened about 24 minutes ago. Let's speak to Neil in Kent, who's given me a ring about this. Neil, what do you make of the alert that went to all those mobile phones?
It's absolutely ridiculous, Peter, to be honest, mate. I mean, me and my wife are sitting in our garden after a couple of days of hard work. My wife's cooling down, I'm cooling down, and suddenly our phones go off, and we think, hang on, that's a nuclear attack. Now, obviously, with what's going on in the world, we're thinking,
yeah, but I mean, Neil, as soon as you look at it, you realise it's not a nuclear attack. You're just talking about wildfires. But, I mean, I was quite perturbed by it, as I think a lot of people were. Lots of things were running through my mind. I wasn't sure what it was. And then I thought, oh, they're giving us... It's like one of those breaking news alerts from those media organisations that just send them out all the time saying, oh, by the way, there are wildfires. I mean, we've known this for days.
Yeah, but the thing is, our phones were about 10, 15 yards away. So I jumped up, belted out to grab hold of my phone, and then I didn't have the reading glasses on, and I'm going, what's that say? Julie, what's that say? What's that say?
Yeah.
And then they said that, and I went, well, we're in the middle of a town. Wildfire's hardly going to affect us. So why are you just scared the hell
But you
out
were
of us?
panicked. You were very scared by it.
Well, yes, because I understand what a nuclear attack warning is. And when I said to my wife, I mean, she said, my heart's going like hell. And I'm thinking, I'm sure that you didn't really need to do a nuclear attack alarm for fires, because at the end of the day, anybody with a bit of common sense knows that you don't, in these conditions, you don't fly around lighting barbecues. I mean, there's some stupid people out there, I understand that, but
but also I mean, there are ways to convey that without doing an alert to people's phone about it. There are ways to make that point. The Prime Minister's been talking on the media today, for example. We looked at that clip a little bit earlier on. There are ways to do it without scaring everybody out of their skin.
Exactly. I mean, I just think that's such an overreaction. It's incredible. I mean, my son-in-law, my daughter's husband is up in Worcester, and he's fighting these fires. And yeah, it's
is he a fireman?
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
okay.
And he's fighting the fires, and at the end of the day, they are bad, but we have them every year.
Yeah,
we've always had them.
Okay,
we don't need a nuclear attack warning saying there's fires in their scrubland.
Yeah. Neil, thanks very much. I think there's a lot for the government to think about in all of that. Thank you. That was Neil in Kent there. And it is really interesting. We'll go to the debate desk now. Lewis Oakley and Lucy Beresford are with me. Lewis is a broadcaster and podcast host. Welcome to the programme. Again, and Lucy, great to have you back, a psychotherapist and life coach. Lucy, maybe I can start with you, actually, because what Neil was saying there was very interesting about the fact that, he didn't have his glasses on. He was with his wife. He was sitting in the garden. Nice evening. Busy week. Sitting there thinking, what the heck is going on here? These phones are going berserk. This is a major thing. There is something really big going on here. And then it's just information we all have. Don't like barbecues. Okay, thanks, Andy.
It's a big misjudgment on the part of the government. I mean, the irony is that often when these things are about to happen, there is a lot of stuff in the media about the fact there's going to be an alert at 6 o'clock on a particular day. And the very fact that there hasn't been that, and suddenly everybody's phones were ringing, really heightened people's anxieties. And then to discover that it was actually something as innocuous as being told, well, it's hot, which we could have told you if you were standing outside, runs the risk not only of triggering so many people who actually thought maybe there's been an invasion, have the Russians arrived, is there a nuclear attack? You want it to be something incredibly serious.
These are meant to be really, really rare. This is not something I would argue that this alert needs to be sent out for. What do you think?
Well, I never really agreed with this before, so when everyone else's phone was going off, mine wasn't. And then I wondered why, what does it say? What does it say? Because I don't really believe in this scaremongering attitude. I don't need my phone to tell me there's danger. If a meteorite is heading towards us, I'll see it. So I just don't really believe in this as a principle.
As a concept.
As a concept, no. I mean, we've got by just fine as a society without our phone telling us there's danger coming.
I mean, it reminds me of Israel, where a lot of people are given alerts through their phone, through apps that they have, about incoming missiles, get to a shelter, go as quickly as you can, and that is something that digitally is well done and is very easy to do for people who are under attack in Israel, and a lot of lives are saved as a result of that. I would argue that 0 lives are going to be saved by that. In fact, it's going to cause...
Well, it's going to be even worse, because actually people are going to ignore the messages in the future. They'll see the message, they might not even read it, but they'll remember what happened today, which was that it was about don't buy a disposable barbecue, or, that pile of fireworks that you've had in your garden, don't light them today. It was a ridiculous statement. The timing was incredibly bad. They didn't really think through the end result. And as a result, it will be like crying wolf, and people will switch off in the future.
And they could have sent that alert at any time in the last 24, 48 hours.
In the last 4 months.
For me, it was the sound, right? I thought I'd set off the fire alarm. I was, oh no, set off the fire alarm. It's everyone's phones going off. I think that could have been a text, because what I will say, because I obviously didn't see it on my own phone, but I've seen it since on someone's screen. And actually, I will say this, is that some people are stupid. Like there was a fire a fire engine called to our street last week because someone had started a fire and it had spread. So I do actually think the message there about don't use barbecues, don't do this, don't do that, some people probably do need to hear it, but I think that the mechanism for doing it, making everyone's phone ping the way you feel like, oh my God, there is actual danger, that could have been a text.
But the basis, that message about not using things that can create a fire in this heat wave have been visible in print media, on TikTok. People have been talking about it on Instagram.
Some people don't read the newspaper or have TikTok.
Fine, but I suspect that those people are also not really going to pay attention. They probably disabled the emergency.
Like me.
Mentioning no names in this room. But I still don't think that this level of information.
A responsible
warranted.
government probably needs to get the message out, especially if we don't know all the figures. If they are getting, lots more reports of things catching fires and people taking barbecues. I know they've just banned barbecues. If that is going on, they probably have thought, well, we just need to get the message out a bit more clearly.
Just pause for a second, guys. What I'm going to do is ask a question here to you and to our viewers and listeners. We have a clip, which I want to play again now, of Andy Burnham talking about the barbecue ban. I want to play this clip. It's not everything he said, but it is a sort of reasonable 40-45 seconds of what he said. What was added to what was added to the sum of our understanding by this alert after this clip? They say basically the same thing. Let's just hear what Andy Burnham said earlier on.
The temporary ban on barbecues, disposable barbecues, comes in today. All retailers will be receiving notification of that ban, and we ask them to obviously implement it in full until further notice when we can remove it. And then I would also want to say to the public, you can see what's happening. 37 significant fires across England and Wales. Please do not light an open fire, a bonfire of any kind. If you're disposing of a cigarette, take great care. This is obviously a really combustible situation, literally, and we need to respect that fact and make sure that no one is taking any risk, because you're taking risk with other people's homes, with other people's lives if you act recklessly.
Right, people will have heard that on the news, they'll have seen it in this programme. Even if you're listening to a commercial radio station that does a 90-second news bulletin, you'll get a little 10 seconds of that, you'll get 15 seconds of it, because this is the biggest story in the country today. So what was the point of that message? Was there a point of that message? And actually, Lucy, from your perspective, working with people who have things like anxiety, that's not going to help, is it?
Well, I think it could actually, as I say, go the other way. It could, first of all, make people switch off to the idea that the government is giving them important information, because it will come across as if they're crying wolf, and the very time they really need us to pay attention, people will have stopped listening. But if you do suffer from anxiety, if you are of a nervous disposition, or perhaps you've had an experience in your life which has been about noise, it's been about something happening out of the blue, something that you can't predict, all of that can really set people off in terms of their level of anxiety and their ability to cope with new information. So there is definitely a way in which the government could be putting this message out more consistently, and they're going to need to keep doing it because these heat waves are only going to increase.
Let me just read out a few messages. Dan and Sandbach says, emergency alerts, how on earth have we got here as a species? Blitz in World War II, anyone? Do not click on it and go into your phone settings to disable them. I hate this nonsense, says Dan. Alex says, I spoke to my father, a message came through twice. First emergency message in Welsh, which he couldn't understand, and then 10 minutes later a message in English came through. Welsh speakers have the edge if there is a real emergency. Considering 2/3 of people in Wales can't speak Welsh, surely better to do the message in English, which everyone can understand. Dee in Warrington says, I was with my elderly dad when the alert went off. He thought he had pressed his care call button by mistake. It's only when I got home I realised it was a stupid alert. Laura in the West Midlands says, just turn the alerts off, easy. I've done it since COVID. It's more fear-mongering and control. Sandra in Suffolk says, the thing is, Burnham holds Cobra meetings when they run out of tea bags. He's now sending alerts out when there's been some forest fires, which we've had most years, and if there's a real emergency, nobody's going to listen, like the boy that cried wolf, the point that Lucy was making there as well. Stephen Millings in Belfast says, people are missing the point, thinking those alerts are for a nuclear attack. That would be a very selfish government who'd want us to live the last few minutes in sheer terror. Much better to die in bliss. And Leanne says, I was dropping off my daughter at Wembley. I heard the alert on my phone. I panicked. Not good when driving. And the worry about my child being on her own as well. Charlotte in Cambridge says, this scare alert was sent for two reasons. Firstly, to change the news stories away from Farage and Reform. Tick. Secondly, to spread fear. Also tick. When these alerts were first introduced, surely everyone knew they'd be used to spread fear. And a fearful population is easier to control. We saw this with COVID. I'm glad I disabled mine, says Charlotte. And final one before the break. Mike in Nottingham says, evening Peter, turn those silly alerts off. It's not difficult. Don't play their game. Great show as usual, says Mike. We'll be back on the debate desk and we will return to the story on Clacton and any other thoughts you may have about the alert or anything else. Whatever you want to talk to us about, however you want to get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Quite a number of people getting in touch about receiving the alert in Welsh first, and then a number of minutes later getting the alert in English. So if it came out in Welsh first and you can't speak Welsh, well, you're not going to be alerted, are you? Let's hear from Nadine, who's in, guess where? Shropshire. It's not very Welsh.
Hi, Peter. Nadine from Shropshire. With regards to the alert that we've just had on our telephones, I live just outside Ellesmere in Shropshire. My alert came through in Welsh. Now, Ellesmere is in Shropshire. Sorry if I've repeated that again. And although we're near North Wales, but it is not in North Wales, and I don't speak Welsh. I wish I did, but I don't speak Welsh. So it came initially in the Welsh language only. And I think probably a couple of minutes later, maybe 3 minutes later, I was desperately trying to use Google Translate to translate this very long message in Welsh to try and understand what the hell was going on. And I think that's not hugely helpful. I can understand that maybe they can't quite tell if one county is bordering with another, but what would be much better would be for our national language, which is, as far as I understand it, English, to be used first and foremost. Thank you. Bye.
Very good points there from Nadine. Thank you. Let's go to David in Bath and Somerset. Lewis and Lucy are still with me. Hi, David. How are you doing? You got this alert in Welsh as well, did you?
Hi, good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
Great show as usual. I know that everyone says that to you, but they all sincerely mean it. Yes, I received my alert in Welsh, and it tells you, it suggests that you go on to gov.uk/alert. Did that, went into the current alert, and it's in Welsh. we're in the Somerset area, and it gives you an option there to translate it to English, which I clicked.
What did you think? Just sorry to interrupt you, David. What did you think when you got this alert through in a language that you can't read and understand? What was running through your mind when that happened, David?
Not quite sure, to be perfectly honest with you. I didn't really think that it could only be about wildfires, etc., although that is obviously sufficiently serious enough. But I selected the Translate to English icon, and it came up and said, this page cannot be translated to English. So I then saw there was a feedback section, so I clicked on that to take part in the survey.
So hold on, David, sorry to interrupt you. Just to go back slightly, so you saw that you could click a link.
Yeah.
You went to the government website. Am I getting this correct? You went to the government website to try to translate it. Is that correct?
No, that's not quite correct.
Okay, you went to Google Translate.
No, the message, the alert came up on a mobile phone, and I decided to go onto the internet and look up gov.uk/alert. Found the alert, and it was in Welsh. It gives you up at the top right-hand corner, it says it's in Welsh and you can translate it to English. Mm-hmm. So I selected English, and the message comes up, sorry, this page cannot be translated into English.
I mean, if this was something genuinely very urgent, if this was, you know, a nuclear bomb is about to fall and you've got 5 minutes to take shelter, you don't really want to have to translate something. I mean, you've been obliterated by Russia, David.
By that time, yeah, I fully accept that. But the other important point I wanted to make was that it offers you the option to take part in a survey.
Right.
A feedback survey. So I thought, right, that's a good idea. Maybe I can suggest to them that they have it in English, as it's the main language in this country, and to give an option to translate to Welsh or whatever. So I decided to select the feedback, take part in the survey, and it asks you at the bottom of that for your consent for them to use your details, either consent or not consent. I clicked on no, not consenting, and it says I can't take part in the survey.
Oh, well, that's very nice, isn't it? Well, David, listen, thanks for...
The old cynic in me says to me,
yeah,
it's the government manipulating the information they're prepared to receive because it doesn't satisfy their requirements.
Yeah. Very, very good points there, David. Thank you for that. I should say we're on the debate desk with Lewis Oakley and Lucy Beresford, but things have taken a slightly different twist to what we thought we were going to be talking about in the last 45 minutes or so. Loads of people getting in touch. Testy on Tyneside says, emergency alerts, great way to reveal a victim's second mobile phone to their domestic abusers. These alerts serve no purpose other than fear, control, to support a false narrative, in this case the climate crisis. Sinister, wrong, 1984. Mark says the only additional thing the emergency message mentioned, which was not in the Burnham's clip, was about not using garden incinerators or fireworks. Apart from that, nothing. Ironic that someone was letting fireworks off around here during the eclipse the other day. Steph has said, I've just had a run around to my fragile 86-year-old mum in a panic over the alert. I've turned off the settings immediately as she thought the fires were encroaching on her bungalow. And that is the case. You know, it's fine for us sitting here. We're totally compos mentis, you know, three people who have use of our faculties. If you're an elderly, vulnerable person, if you're someone who's dealing with domestic abuse or whatever.
But I had to read the message at least twice to realise that actually all it was saying was, don't use things that can start a fire. It was just so much overkill for the message that they were trying to get out there. And I think it will have genuinely scared people who were driving, people who were just about to go down into an underground and lose Wi-Fi, people who were in situations not like sitting like we were outside the studio, able to process it and read it and realise that it wasn't threatening. There must have been people who read this and actually thought something terrifying was happening to them imminently.
That's why the Welsh thing is so
Yeah.
It's
worrying.
crazy.
Imagine getting a terrifying alert and then not being able to read what it says.
Yeah, exactly. You've got the emergency alert aspect there, but you can't even translate it as was the case with the caller there with David. Mark in Starbridge says, "Hi guys, my 8-year-old daughter is in tears since that alert. My disabled mum just called me, scared out of her skin. I feel like smacking Andy Burnham in the face. I hate the Labour Party. Idiots," says Mark in Starbridge. Obviously, you don't want anybody to be smacked in the face, but nonetheless, I think that is a very, very interesting point.
I do worry about, my daughter is autistic and she's usually fine, but sounds like that will freak her out. And I haven't had time to check, was she okay? But it is one of those things where you have to, one of your callers or people that text in just said about domestic abuse. If you've got a second phone, there's so many things that you think this really should be used for something serious, not something that, as I've said, could have been a text. My thing is about drivers, because if you were driving, there's a chance you could have been startled. If you're going 70 miles an hour, but also if you weren't startled and you kept control of the car, you're probably thinking, I need to check my phone. Is something about to happen?
Well, exactly that point is made by Joanna in Salisbury. Says, "Hi, Cardi B. Hi, Joanna. Damned alarm. My phone was in the boot. Luckily, I wasn't going quickly. I stamped on the brake. The car behind me nearly went into the back of me. He wasn't concentrating because his phone went off and he was looking down." Exactly that point. Joanna experienced that this evening.
Well, if we see a spike in road collisions tonight, I think the government will have a lot to answer for.
Yeah. I'll read out a few more messages. Dave says, "I was out walking my dog in Loughborough, approached by a man and asked if he could help. He was terrified. I had to explain what the alert was. He was very relieved. He told me he was 92 and he couldn't read the message. He really was terrified." Jeanette from Greater Manchester says, "I'm in my 70s and I live alone. The alert tone really startled me. I almost ran, not that I'm able to, into the room where my phone was. I didn't have reading glasses on initially. You could only see the warning triangle. For a few minutes I thought I might be in some kind of immediate danger. I get using this type of alert if I needed to evacuate, but not for stating the obvious." Jeanette, that is a brilliant message. It illustrates things really, really clearly, and a lot of people will have experienced something very similar. So thank you for that. Rob says, "Anyone with half a brain turned this nonsense off months ago." Elaine says, "All the usual suspects in the mainstream media and left-wing commentators are gutted today that Nigel didn't attend the declaration to be humiliated and abused by far-left nut jobs who were just waiting for their chance to get their 5 minutes of fame." As promised, we will discuss Clacton with Lucy and with Lewis. We'll be with you in a second to do that. On the alert, on Clacton, on whatever else you want to talk about, please give me a shout this evening, here right through until 9 o'clock. 0344 499 1000. Keep your voice notes coming in, your texts, your calls, however you want to communicate, let me know. Stay with us here on the Evening Exchange on Talk.
his own Farage fest last night, which was held in a paddock about 12 miles from where I am here at the pier. And that's where he delivered his victory speech before the count came in. And some view that as deeply controversial.
If you went to do a victory speech at the count, what you'd have had is 30 chumps there, all sort of screaming and shouting and heckling and, you know, making a big distraction on stage. And I think he's gone, that is not the image I want projected via national television, going out to the whole of Great Britain.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Paul has been in touch and says, yes, I got it, as did my wife. It made us jump. Total misuse of the system. It doesn't do the PTSD much good either. He's a military veteran and worked in the police service as well. If they use this too often, people will ignore it, cry wolf. Disposable barbecues don't cause fires. The people who use them misuse them and fail to dispose of them correctly. They're the ones that cause and start the fires. Big Brother management. Great show, says Paul. And Tristan says, I was on my way back from work, and what do I get? An alert as further justification for the idiots in government to push net zero, which he has already done today. This is totally unacceptable and just shows the clear intentions of this government to govern by fear. Utterly abhorrent. Let's take a voice note from Kevin.
Hi, Peter. Jeff from Nottingham here. Just a quick one on this emergency service alert that came out. Just out of curiosity, I don't know if it's right. Does that signal go to all UK SIM cards? And if that's so, everybody on holiday, wherever they may be, if they've got their UK SIM card in their phone, all those in Europe that are using it, they'd have got that message as well. Complete waste of an emergency alert. Thanks for the show. Bye.
Thank you. Sorry, it was Jeff rather than Kevin. Apologies. Vince says, have the government set the alert in different languages for the million illegal immigrants who got free phones and unlimited calls and data, and the 3 million foreigners who have been in the UK for decades and refuse to learn English. The alerts are just another waste of taxpayers' money and the nanny state we live in under this incompetent, pointless Labour government. Final point on this, and then I do want to talk about Clacton because we have got distracted from Clacton. The One Show is apparently a programme on BBC One, and the alert went off during the show. Let's have a look at this.
We've got an incredible update on one of her very first one-show stories.
Couldn't make that up, could you? I think it's a fire alarm.
You've got some form of fire alarm going on.
It's fine, we'll continue.
But we continue.
And Christy is not the only former host returning to the show, because Matt will be here too to...
Well, they valiantly went through all of that. Ours was in the news, so it didn't go off exactly when we were there. Just a final quick thought on this from Lewis and from Lucy on the debate desk. Lewis?
I think that a lot of people are now going to disable this, and I think it's been misused. I think it could have been a text message. I think a lot of people are going to, especially if you've got elderly relatives or anyone that is sensitive to noise, going to turn it off. It should have been. This should be used if you're in immediate danger and there's a chance you can save yourself.
I think it's been very badly misjudged, very scary for a lot of people to receive, whether they're young, driving, or elderly and they can't read it. So many ways in which people will have been unnecessarily triggered. And as a result, I think a lot of people will now disable this. And as a result, the government won't be able to communicate with us. And that is exactly the unintended consequence and the opposite of what they'd intended.
In the last 5 minutes of the debate desk, let's talk about Clacton, because Nigel Farage, MP, is his title once again. He did very well, getting about 63% of the vote. Count Binface got about 26% of the vote, 27% of the vote. Lucy, what's your thought on this? What do you think it tells us?
Well, I think it tells you that Nigel Farage's judgment is perhaps not very secure. He obviously took a gamble to resign and call the by-election and then got wrong-footed by all the parties who decided that they weren't going to compete. So he ended up having to stand against a whole host of very strange parties and people who'd never stood for Parliament before. And as a result, it's a Pyrrhic victory. To be able to say, yes, I am now returned with an extra 1,000 people voting for me, which is really, that's the only margin of the people who voted in 2024 to now. The idea that somehow this proves anything about how successful reform is or is not. He hasn't been standing against the major parties. He didn't have to contend with Restore. And at the same time, this is someone who, up until recently, the party was leading in the polls. He's the leader of the party and he was the incumbent for that seat. And he still could only get 2/3 of the vote. So yes, he's won, and that's how Reform have spun it. But it is, as I say, a Pyrrhic victory.
I'm not sure what he's achieved here, because the investigation is back open. We very likely could be going back to Clacton to go for another by-election very soon. So, and obviously some of this is hindsight, but I don't understand why he wouldn't have just waited for the investigation to conclude, and if he was going to call a by-election himself, call it then, or wait until a by-election was called without his hand in it.
It distracted people, perhaps, from the 5 million, from that whole issue. Is that not something that he attempted to do and move the conversation on in that regard? No?
No. Look, here's the thing with Nigel. I think a lot of people will say, you know, is he treated unfairly? Is it a bit different? I would say, yeah, he probably is treated a bit differently, but strap in, because if you are going to be the Prime Minister, like, you think the civil service is going to be easy? You know, I think we don't talk sometimes enough about Liz Truss, and when she says, you know, I got into the top job, but the mechanics of government were pushing against me. Well, that's what Nigel's experience is going to be. He's not going to get into number 10 if he does get that job, and everyone's just going to do as he says. So I don't know, this is just his course to bear. This is it. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be hard. And if he either straps in and has the energy for it, or he doesn't.
The problem he had was that 5 million, the question mark over the 5 million, didn't go away precisely because none of the other big parties were around. So instead of the by-election being about different issues and different people being interviewed on a different day, there were really only 2 characters that the media wanted to talk about: Nigel Farage and how he gets funded, and Count Binface. And so it actually exposed something that he wished was something people didn't really talk about. So for that reason alone, I think it was a misstep on his part.
Thank you both very much indeed. That's Lewis Oakley, their broadcaster and podcast host, and Lucy Beresford, psychotherapist and life coach. Very different debate desk this evening, but I really appreciate you joining us. I just want to read out a quick message in regard to a story last night, which I think is particularly interesting because there was so much controversy over what Edwina Currie, the former Conservative government minister, said. And Lola has been in touch, who is a sex worker herself. Now, Edwina Currie suggested that actually maybe Piddington and places like that needed a brothel. Lola says, I found Edwina Currie's remarks extremely offensive. As a sex worker, you're slightly more streetwise than the average person. So what she was saying is that there should be a brothel open for migrants. Has she thought of the danger of those sex workers that they would be placed in, seeing some of the most dangerous men in the world, not to mention some from sub-Saharan Africa who will have HIV, hepatitis and TB? A lot of my friends are sex workers, and if that is what she thinks is a good idea, the going rate is between £400 and £600 an hour. What sex workers does she think would go and work seeing migrants? Well, the answer is about 0. We are not welcome in HMOs, hotels, army camps or brothels. They're never let into a brothel because of the danger these migrants pose. Sex workers are human beings. Edwina's remarks are extremely foolish. If a migrant was listening to her on your show last night, she was basically giving them the green light to go and assault and do God knows what to sex workers. You've got to remember that sex workers are someone's daughter, sister, wife, mother, even grandmother. We're not monsters, although that is how it seems we are often portrayed in the media. Lola, thank you for that. That definitely was a very, very interesting point, and I hadn't heard that perspective before. Just to say that a few minutes ago, about 5 minutes ago, one of our producers received a second alert with the noise after receiving the first almost an hour beforehand. Have you had this sort of higgledy-piggledy thing in regard to these alerts coming through? Let me know your experience and your view on all of it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Jason Arday, Professor Jason Arday, who was at Cambridge University at the centre of a plagiarism scandal, has been found dead. This is breaking news. We're just getting it into our newsroom in the last few minutes. He was, of course, a professor at Cambridge. There's been a huge controversy running for 2 to 3 weeks now about his works, about his claims, certainly when it came to what he was saying and claiming his childhood had been through, claimed he was mute, claimed he was autistic, claimed he only had 2 GCSEs, and then that he couldn't read and write, that he'd completed marathons, all sorts of fantastical claims. A book was due to come out. In fact, it's out in America at the moment, which is basically an autobiography. I'm being told that at an address in Battersea in South London this afternoon, he was found unresponsive. A crime is not suspected, which is generally the words that the police use when they mean that someone has taken their own life. And we know that he was found unresponsive this afternoon. We're just getting that information into our newsroom right now, and when I get any more information about that, I will, of course, bring it to you. We're working, and the producers are working behind the scenes to get reaction to this from people who knew Jason Arday. Earlier in the week, I spoke to Dr. Lisa McKenzie, who we're trying to get on the line at the moment. She is an academic who worked at Durham University with Jason Arday. And the Telegraph newspaper is reporting that the former University of Cambridge professor has been found dead, found unresponsive at an address in Battersea in South London on Friday afternoon. He was pronounced dead at the scene. A spokesman for the Metropolitan Police said officers were called by the London Ambulance Service at 12 minutes past 3 today. The spokesman said, sadly, a 41-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. His next of kin have been informed and are being supported by officers. At this time, his death is being treated as unexpected, but is not believed to be suspicious. The case is being investigated by officers from the Metropolitan Police's Central South Command Unit. A file will be prepared for the coroner. So that is the confirmation that Professor Jason Arday has been found dead. He had resigned from the University of Cambridge last week after the scandal. He was Professor of Sociology of Education at the University of Cambridge, and he resigned on the 5th of August from that role, which was Wednesday last week, if I'm correct in that, following accusations of plagiarism. He was the university's youngest ever black professor. Last week, Cambridge launched an investigation into Mr. Arday's appointment and tenure at the university. It will feed into a review of the university's hiring process for all senior academic positions. And Mr. Arday resigned just a few hours after the university announced the investigation, citing the unrelenting level of public scrutiny. So that is a confirmation that the former professor at Cambridge, Jason Arday, has been found dead at an address in South London. And when I have more information on that, I will bring that to you. Certainly it has been the biggest story, I would argue, of the summer. The wildfires have been a huge issue affecting many, many people, of course, and there have been casualties as a result of that, and that is a dreadful story. We know that the heat wave and associated stories, there have been stories about Gaza and Iran and Andy Burnham becoming Prime Minister. But when it comes to a story that has, I think, captured the public's attention, and certainly our attention here at Talk, well, Jason Arday's fantastical claims, the claims in his books, in his writings, in the fact that he clearly plagiarised various documents, including his PhD thesis. There have been people I've spoken to who have spoken to him and have worked with him over many years who simply didn't believe his story. There were people who had gone to primary school with him. We've seen clips of that, for example, of people saying that he was a very chatty person. He wasn't mute, as he said he was. It is a tragedy and it is absolutely dreadful that Jason Arday is dead, and I'm sure there will be many questions asked about that media coverage. There will be people who will blame the media. This has also been a dreadful tragedy that has, I think, been kind of a left-right issue, certainly a very divisive issue as well. And when you look at Twitter, which is more on the right, versus things like Blue Sky, more on the left, there are many people who simply can't work out why Jason Arday was criticised to such a degree for his fantastical and false claims. So we're in a situation, I think, where many questions will be asked about this. It is dreadful. He is a father, I believe, of 2 young children. I can certainly be corrected on that point. But to my knowledge, he is a father. He talked about the impact on his family. There had been many academics and colleagues who had worked with him who had said that they were certainly concerned, and the University of Cambridge launching a number of inquiries into this. Various other universities as well. I know Durham and various others had said that he either hadn't, I think Liverpool was one of the universities, Liverpool John Moores, I think, that he had claimed to have honorary doctorates or various qualifications or indeed jobs with. Those had various people had taken them off their website or said that he didn't have the jobs in the first place. So clearly his public profile, his reputation collapsed. He was married with 2 young children, and it looks as if, we don't know, but and of course a coroner will be appointed and a file will be prepared for the coroner, as we're told by the police. But the fact is that Professor Jason Arday has been found dead today. He resigned from the University of Cambridge last week. That was Wednesday last week. And we have a statement from the Metropolitan Police. Just to reiterate this news, just coming into our newsroom now, that a spokesman from the Metropolitan Police said officers were called by the London Ambulance Service at 3:12 on Friday. He said, sadly, a 41-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. His next of kin have been informed and are being supported by officers. At this time, his death is being treated as unexpected, but is not believed to be suspicious. The case is being investigated by officers from the Met's Central Southern Command Unit. A file will be prepared for the coroner. When the police say that something is not believed to be suspicious or a crime is not suspected, that is essentially a euphemism for what we know to usually be suspected suicide. But the coroner hasn't pronounced on this, so we don't know. We don't know all the circumstances around that, and I'm not saying that is fact. I'm simply saying that that is usually what is said in these cases. We'll get reaction to that in just a minute. We can go to a break now, and then we will talk about the Clacton by-election. But stay with us here on Talk.
His own Farage Fest last night, which was held in a paddock about 12 miles from where I am here at the pier, and that's where he delivered his victory speech before the count came in, and some view that as deeply controversial.
If you went to do a victory speech at the count, what you'd have had is 30 chumps there, all sort of screaming and shouting and heckling and, you know, making a big distraction on stage. And I think he's gone, that is not the image I want projected via national television, going out to the whole of Great Britain.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, just to recap that news, Professor Jason Arday has been found dead. The 41-year-old was found unresponsive at an address in South London this afternoon. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and we will have further coverage of that coming up in just a few minutes' time. But that is the breaking news this evening, that Professor Jason Arday has been found dead. The Cambridge academic controversially resigning just last week, and an investigation launched by Cambridge into his appointment and tenure at the university, and there's a review of the university's hiring process for all senior academic positions. He resigned a few hours after the university announced the investigation, citing, as he put it, the unrelenting level of public scrutiny. Just on the alert that happened about an hour and a quarter ago, we've had reports from various people that it is being heard again, including on the tube in London. In fact, one of our colleagues has been telling us that they heard it on the tube, an hour or so later than it was sent to others. We all got it here in this office, certainly in the studio and in the control room that I can see the top team behind the glass work in the control room, and all 8 of us got it at the same time. So that was just after 7 o'clock. Indeed, it was on the One show, and various other broadcasters had it at that stage. We were broadcasting live. We'll return to that story as well between now and 9 o'clock. I want to talk about Clacton and the by-election, the result of which came through this morning. And there's been a bit of a row about that for lots of reasons, but particularly when it comes to what Nigel Farage was told by Essex Police, what he decided to do based on the advice from his security team. And there was quite a testy exchange between Lee Anderson, the chairman of Reform UK, and indeed the BBC's presenter Charlie State. This was this morning. We'll get some reaction from our guest John Rentoul in a second, but let's just see what happened on the BBC this morning.
Is it true that Mr. Farage was notified, as he said he was, by Essex Police of a security threat?
Well, Nigel said during his speech, he said he'd been told not to turn up because there could have been, a bit of bother there within, inside the county and all. So he's took the advice, and I think he's done the right thing. And like I say, Charlie, I think his time is better spent saying a massive thank you to the hundreds of people, the thousands of people that's turned up over the past month to help him secure this historic victory.
Understood. Essex Police, BBC understands, say they didn't advise anyone not to attend.
Yeah. Well, sometimes some of these police forces that we've been dealing with recently are about as honest as you lot at the BBC.
Okay, so you're saying that Essex Police, that they're not telling it how it is when they say that there was no advice to your party leader not to attend?
I've not spoken to Nigel about this. I've not spoken to Essex Police. If Nigel gets up on stage and says that he's been advised not to attend the event, then I believe Nigel above the police and especially above you lot at the BBC.
Lee Anderson, combative as always, there on an interview with the BBC this morning. Well, John Rentoul is the chief political commentator of The Independent and joins me now. John, what do you make of this row over the security and the by-election in general? Nigel Farage will be happy, I suppose, with 63%. 32 of the 34 candidates losing their deposits, so a nice 16 grand for the taxpayer out of that. What does it all mean, do you think?
I think the by-election costs a bit more than 16 grand.
Yes, well, indeed.
No, I mean, Lee Anderson really wasn't helping there, was he? I mean, making it again a bit more ridiculous and a bit a sort of bun fight about who said what to whom doesn't really add much to the dignity of Reform or Nigel Farage. I mean, Nigel Farage is trying to present himself as a credible candidate to be Prime Minister in a few years' time. I mean, he even talks about a general election soon, maybe even next year. But the way this by-election has descended into a circus really hasn't done his reputation any good. And I think there's been a lot of voters who might have been prepared to consider voting Reform, who would have been put off by a lot of what's been going on in Clacton in the by-election.
So what do you think will be putting them off? You've given some sort of thoughts there, but and also, have we moved on in any way from the £5 million controversy? Because we know that probe has just started up again this morning. Now Nigel Farage is Mr. Nigel Farage MP again.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think that the fact that he received a donation of £5 million personally is a bit awkward for him, because he presented himself as a man of the people, and I think a lot of voters will think there's something a bit strange about that. And the fact that he didn't declare it, I didn't know that you had to declare donations made in the 12 months before you became an MP. So perhaps Nigel Farage didn't, but he should have just said, I wasn't aware of that rule. I apologise, and let's move on. Instead, he's called this ridiculous by-election, unnecessary by-election, which has given Count Binface a huge amount of publicity. And although it was a good result for him, undoubtedly, and the turnout wasn't at all bad. And he increased his vote and all that, but I think he just looks a little bit unserious through all of this.
I mean, there are going to be lots of people who say that Nigel Farage is unserious in general. I would argue that he's actually, in some senses, been more serious, because it was interesting that Tim Montgomery, no stranger to this programme, who is a reform activist, former Conservative activist, and indeed founder of Conservative Home previously, he had said that Nigel Farage has been too serious, and what he needed to do himself, rather than Lee Anderson, was to go out in the media around this morning smiling, happy, here I am in the pub with my pint, famous victory for Reform UK. And actually we've seen perhaps a more churlish Nigel Farage, perhaps a more serious and one, of course, focused on security for various obvious reasons, but someone who Kemi Badenoch called woke this week, because he is someone who, in her view anyway, sees himself very much as the victim, as Reform UK do, in her opinion. I just wonder what you make of all that kind of noise.
No, I think you're absolutely right there, Peter. I mean, I think the fact is that Nigel Farage is his greatest ambassador, but also his worst enemy. I mean, he is a very effective communicator, and he could have, as you said, he could have celebrated victory in a chatty and sort of homely way, communicating with people. Instead, he refused to attend the count, which makes him look churlish. He may have had some genuine concerns about his security, and I have a lot of sympathy with him on that front. Although when he was interviewed about the £5 million, which he has said that he intends to devote to his personal security, he admitted he hadn't actually spent any of it on his personal security. So I don't know what's going on there. I think a bit more straightforwardness from him would not come amiss.
John, the alert that has gone out this evening, did you get it to your phone?
I did. Very irritating it was too.
Yeah, it's interesting because a former senior national security professional in this country of my acquaintance, and I will put it only in those terms, has messaged me to say the government has very few tools to reach everyone all at once. This is someone who sat in Cobra at various times and made very important decisions about the national security of this country, who happens to be a contact of mine. This person has messaged me and said the government actually has very few tools to reach everyone all at once. It should be used for immediate threat to life circumstances only. I agree with that. Do you?
Couldn't agree more. I mean, absolutely. I mean, this ought to be for exceptional circumstances only, because it is the state reaching into the personal lives of all citizens. But to tell them, don't light a fire in the middle of a heat wave and a drought. I mean, it is like, mind the gap, or, please hold the handrail.
See, it's sorted.
It's patronising and unnecessary and intrusive. I just think it's completely misconceived. You're absolutely right. It should be for life and death situations. It should be for where people, you cannot communicate with people any other way, and you need to do so immediately.
And what we've already had from our viewers and listeners, from quite a number of people, is people saying, I'm actually going to turn the alerts off. Because I don't want that to happen again. Especially, we've had people talking about elderly parents who've been confused, people who've got alerts in Welsh, not being able to read them because they haven't got their glasses on, people in their 70s who are not that mobile in one case, running into a room, almost tripping, to get the alert to say what on earth is going on here. I mean, it has caused perhaps more panic than it has actually assuaged by saying, don't light a barbecue on a parched field.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, obviously it's disruptive to use this device. That's the whole point of it. You've got to get people's attention. But you might as well, you should only use it to get people's attention for something serious.
OK. John, listen, thank you very much indeed. That is John Rentoul there, who is the chief political commentator of The Independent. Loads of people getting in touch about Farage and about the alert, about lots of different things. Becca says, if I was Farage, I wouldn't believe a word the police said on anything. Counter-terrorism have had to refer themselves to the Independent Office of Police Conduct. One person says, Nigel never said that Essex Police advised him not to attend. They just stated there was a threat. I watched the speech live. Simon Wanstead says, what on earth was that noise? Did he need to do that? Really? I'm so angry now. I can't move too quickly, but that noise scared the bejesus out of me. Rachel says, I do appreciate the seriousness of wildfires, but I've just had an alert on my phone about wildfires and barbecues. We have a major crisis with invading illegal immigrants, and the Prime Minister chooses to call a Cobra meeting on heat and barbecues. James says, Nigel Farage can't put up the big top and then say he doesn't want to come to the circus. This whole thing has been an absolute farce. Nobody comes out looking good. Testy says it's irresponsible of the government to issue an alert for quite normal hot weather. It's more gaslighting propaganda to scare the public, dupe them into compliance and control. Phone emergency alerts are easily disabled. Go to settings and search emergency, then switch off from there. Mine's been off since before the first test one they did years ago. It is pointless, says Testy. John says, I don't see a contradiction. Essex Police could have warned of a threat and also not advised Nigel to attend the account. All over social media today are photographs of masked protesters outside the count. Barbara in London says Samara is clearly anti-reform. There was a photo published today of a crowd of 50 masked left-wing agitators in front of Essex Town Hall. By the way, the police lie. I don't think Samara is anti-reform or pro-reform. I think she's just a reporter. Penny in Essex says everyone has a severe government alert on their phone. Scared me to death. Awful noise. Another person on migrant freebies says this isn't just SIM cards. We were due to discuss that story actually, but we've been overtaken by events. At the one near where I used to live in Caversham, prostitutes are delivered in a large Asian taxi every Friday night after 9 p.m. Someone is paying for this and it is organised. Debbie says if houses are being set on fire, are they going to stop solar panels on schools and hospitals once they catch fire? It's very difficult to put them out. John says, please explain why reform paying for the by-election would have been ludicrous. The payment would have covered ballot papers, ballot sessions and people's time. Nobody would be politically compromised. John, you're wrong. It would be massively politically compromising. Are you honestly saying that if you went to an election, would you be happy, John, to go to an election paid for by the Green Party, where a Green Party candidate was likely to win? You say, hold on a second, they're paying for all this? And then their guy wins? Sorry, John, I just can't agree with you, but thank you for your message nonetheless. Another person says climate change arsonists who's deliberately started fires led to the loss of life of innocent people. They must face the death penalty. It's as simple as that. I don't think it is as simple as that, but anyway. Mick says this government is still acting like a student union. They mock Farage for not going to the electoral result reading, but Labour, Tories, Lib Dems and Greens did not go either. Hypocrisy and two-tier outrage. Well, they weren't standing, Mick, so I suppose that's a slightly separate point. Mick in Dorset says, regarding the very sad death of a father and husband, society cannot refuse to challenge facts, as we would be living in a false world. Michelle says that is very sad news about Jason Arday, poor man. I feel very sad for his children and family. I hope he didn't end his own life. He clearly had a very interesting tale to tell and a future even after everything coming out. And just on that point, when it comes to the nature of Jason Arday's death, we have this statement from the Metropolitan Police saying at the time of his death, Metropolitan Police saying, at this time, his death is being treated as unexpected, but is not believed to be suspicious. The case is being investigated by officers from the Met Central South Command Unit. A file will be prepared for the coroner. This is after a 41-year-old man pronounced dead at the scene. His next of kin have been informed are being supported by officers. More on that in a minute. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Ryan has been in touch and says alerts are still going off on people's phones on my train. It's a farce. There are so many confused people. Alex says, so upsetting about Jason Arday. Andrew Neil tweeted and talked about his safety, Jason Arday's safety. Surely social services should have been looking after him. Martin says, it's always terrible to think of someone in such a dark place taking their own life. We don't know for sure, it should be said. I'm not criticising Martin in the slightest, but we don't know for sure what has happened here, but it certainly looks that way. The people pushing the ridiculous DEI agenda must be pleased with their work in the sad demise of a man with obvious mental issues. God rest his soul, says Martin. Mick in Dorset has been in touch too and says barbecues are on the beaches of France waiting to invade. Sarah in Weymouth says, I think the message needs to not disappear. There's no need for the emergency alarm to go with it. Public information notices shouldn't scare you. Dawn says, I got the barbecue alert. I am surprised that I wasn't accompanied by a big photo of Andy Burnham in a Big Brother pose. What next? An arrest by the Thought Police. Lots more about the alert coming in, including from Jerry in Bromley, who said that government alarm really shook our family who were all sitting in the kitchen. Could this type of alarm cause a dangerous stampede in crowded places? Jane says perhaps we should all send an alert to Downing Street when a mega boat arrives. Nat in Tel Aviv has been in touch on Jason Arday as well, his poor children. I hope he's at peace now. This is the news that the academic who resigned from University of Cambridge last week, Jason Arday, the former Cambridge professor, has been found dead. I want to speak to Philip Kisley now, and Philip is an academic himself. Thank you for joining us on short notice, Philip. Dreadful news, tragic news here. What do you make of this?
Hi, Peter. Well, I'm just taking it in because, like everybody else, I've just seen the news, and I suppose the first thing that came to me was, you know, the farce turns to horrible tragedy, as these things do. This was a narrative. We don't know, as you just said before, we don't know what has happened to Jason Arday, but if he has taken his own life, then we have to look very closely at DEI, I should say. Sorry. What it is, what it trades in, because it trades in vulnerable people, doesn't it? If you look at his history and you look at how he constructed his own history, the one thing that comes out of that is that he was a very vulnerable man, and it doesn't seem that anybody really cared about that because he was the hero, he was the poster boy, he was DEI trademark, as it were, and he was valuable in that respect. I can't imagine what he's gone through. Now, we've all been talking about this all of last week, myself included. One of the things I said towards the end of last week was that this really isn't about him anymore. This is about Cambridge, this is about the ideology, and this is about the institutions, because this stuff has poisoned the institutions. We don't think in terms of meritocracy anymore. We think in terms of skin color and neurodiversity and sexuality. It's all wrong. And Jason Arday's fate, if he has taken his own life, is just utterly appalling, tragic and shocking.
Can I just read you something that has come through from Bob in Chelmsford, which I think is a very, very good and very telling and very sober message on all of this. It is very shocking, but I'm afraid I'm not entirely surprised. His fall from that very high pedestal, says Bob, was so great, I imagine he felt he had no other way out. I do wonder what part we've all played in fueling the fire around this story. Different circumstances, but it reminds me of the awful tragedy of Caroline Flack. We have discussed this in great depth on this programme, on lots of other programmes. He has been, you know, a figure of fun, certainly, and he has been someone whose fantastical, ridiculous, false claims have been probed from basically every angle over the last few weeks. What is the... I'm going to speak to a psychotherapist about this in a minute, but I just wonder, when you are at the centre of this kind of storm, when this is happening, and you're being essentially cancelled to some degree when there's a huge left-right divide, I would argue as well, Philip, and I think you've talked about that, or at least hinted at that, on the DEI side of things. How do you think, we as a society should handle these things whilst having rigour, having questioning, having journalism, having critical thinking, but at the same time thinking, there's a person at the centre of all this?
I think the difficulty is, Peter, that it's all so new to us. 10, 15, 20 years ago, certainly, we did deal in meritocracy, and that has gone by the wayside. So we have this complex fantasy construction of all of these characteristics that we have to think about, and how much they're worth on their own, how much they're worth in relation to other characteristics, whether you're black, whether you're gay, whether you're trans, whether all of these things. We need to put it under a microscope, and we need to just say, no, this is very, very dangerous stuff, not least because we don't know about it. We don't know where we're going with this stuff. We don't know what it's doing to society. I can tell you a little bit about cancellation, because as you know, I was cancelled myself, but for very different reasons. I was cancelled for standing up to Islamism and fighting back against aggressive trans activists. And I was in a very dark place, Peter. One day on a dark January morning, I got a cab and to a car park in Leeds, and went to the top of the car park in Leeds and looked over the edge and contemplated what it would be like to throw myself off there. So in a way,
Philip, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry to hear you were at that stage, and maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that, about what led to that. Certainly you've talked about the circumstances around it. Was it things people were saying? Was it how social media was interacting? Was it about friends? I mean, what was kind of going on for you overall that it must have felt completely overwhelming?
Yeah, well, it did. I can't talk about the particular institution. Sure. We've got to talk about generally what was happening to me. It was at the, it was post-October 2023. It was the Hamas craze on campuses, and it was this sense that everything was just going crazy. And again, the powers that be didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know how to cope with this mindset. And of course, I was speaking out about it in the media and on social media, and I was cancelled. And it wasn't about the pile-ons, it wasn't about what people were saying. It was the simple fact of, I'm going to lose my job. I don't know how I'm going to pay for my mortgage. I don't feel as though I have a future. What the hell am I going to do? Now, my case was ridiculous and minor and nothing compared to what he's gone through. But he was put in this position, Peter. Okay, he should never have been there. He should never have gone to university. If you've looked at his research, if you've seen any of his teaching, he simply should not have been there.
Let's return to that in just 1 second, Philip. I just want to say, because we are talking about big issues here, particularly when it comes to suicide. And I want to say, if someone is thinking about this, having suicidal ideation, having suicidal thoughts, please call the Samaritans for urgent support. You can call 116 123. The number is free to call from both landlines and mobiles. It's open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. 116 123 is the Samaritans. Wayne has been in touch and touches on just what Philip has said there. He says that Cambridge University has a part to play in this, in Wayne's opinion, playing into his fantasy, elevating him beyond his abilities. When fantasizing comes to a crashing end for some people, they can't function in the real world. R.I.P. Jason Arday. Is there something in that, Philip?
I think there is, and I think the fantasy probably started quite small and then accelerated because it was never challenged. And there's evidence to suggest that when lies or fantasies were exposed, they were just dealt with, they were managed and manipulated. So I don't think it's just Cambridge. We're not talking about just Cambridge here. We're talking about the whole sector. We're talking about the institutions. This stuff has metastasized right across all of the institutions. This is a fantasy narrative that we're all having to deal with. And as I say, it's changing society. It's changing the nature of how we function. And it deals very specifically, as I say, with vulnerable people. It wasn't just about this man's colour. It was about his neurodiversity. And anybody could see that he was struggling, but he was treated like a messiah. And it was just very odd to see. And now, of course, I assume that the most awful thing has happened, and it's just incredibly sad.
Philip, thank you. Philip Kisley is a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. I appreciate you joining us on short notice as well as the story is breaking. And just a reminder, we are talking about Philip has talked about his own suicidal thoughts. We've been told by the Metropolitan Police that it is not believed to be suspicious with Jason Arday. Obviously, we don't know the full circumstances. The coroner has clearly not reported yet. But we also know that when police say something's not believed to be suspicious, what that is a euphemism for. Usually, what is believed at this time, we'll be very careful around that. And for urgent support, if you want to ring the Samaritans, if you are having these thoughts or you're being affected by issues with this very, very sensitive topic, I want you to feel as if you can switch this programme off, you can turn down the radio, you can switch off the telly. You don't have to listen to this if you don't want to. It's a big news story. We're going to cover it for the next 20 minutes, right up until 9 o'clock. But if you are having those thoughts and you are feeling vulnerable, please ring the Samaritans. You can give them a ring on 116 123. The phone number is free to call from both landlines and mobiles. We're open 24 hours a day, or they are open 24 hours a day. Lots to discuss on Jason Arday's death. We will speak to Lucy Beresford again. She was in the studio here about an hour ago. She's now home in her part of London. We will speak to her via Zoom in a second. She's a psychotherapist who's dealt with a lot of these issues. I think there are many, many questions about what has led to this point. And I think there are many people being critical even of us. We've had messages in saying that, talk has its part to play. I don't agree with that at all. I think we've been covering this journalistically and rigorously and asking critical questions about Jason Arday, as we should, and as we should continue to do, I think, despite this tragedy. That is my opinion, may not be the opinion of everyone, and whatever you want to say on this issue, please do give me a shout. Please do give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Lucy Beresford after the break. Stay with us.
His own Farage vest last night, which was held in a paddock about 12 miles from where I am here at the pier, and that's where he delivered his victory speech before the count came in, and some view that as deeply controversial.
He went to do a victory speech at the count. What you'd have had is 30 chumps there, all sort of screaming and shouting and heckling and, making a big distraction on stage. And I think he's gone, that is not the image I want projected via national television, going out to the whole of Great Britain.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
David in London has been in touch on Jason Arday's death. That has just broken in the last 45 minutes. We're covering this story, and indeed we were due to go just until 9 o'clock this evening, but actually the programme has just been extended to 10 o'clock because there are so many big news stories around, particularly the death of Jason Arday, which we're going to talk about with the psychotherapist Lucy Beresford in just a moment. But I just want to read out what David in London has said first. This one is on Cambridge, says David. The panel, the board, whoever is around the table, this is on them. Not really a hard lesson, just a blinding lack of common sense. Diversity, equity and inclusion, no. Let's see a return to the democracy of merit. And as it will be said by many, a very high place to fall from. Marush in Durham has been in touch too and says, as an educational researcher myself, I'm very sad to hear about Jason's demise. In this area of sociology, psychology and education, I believe everyone's views and opinions count no matter what. R.I.P. Jason, says Marush in Durham. So thank you to Marush and indeed to David. And thanks too to Lucy Beresford. She, of course, was in the studio about an hour ago on the debate desk when we were talking about the alert issue, which we may return to as the programme goes on. Lucy is now home in her part of London and very kindly has joined us again on at short notice on the very sad death of Professor Jason Arday, who has been found dead, found unresponsive at an address in South London, Battersea, this afternoon. Lucy, a profound shock to so many people, not least his wife and 2 children. We're also in a situation where he has been the subject of so much media scrutiny over the past number of weeks. I would argue that most of that scrutiny is entirely warranted given the nature of the story. What is your reaction to what has happened today?
It's an incredibly sad ending to this particular story, which had attracted so much media attention. And the media attention was valid in as much as it was curious about what happened within a university and why they had chosen to elevate someone. But what often seemed to be missing was that this was a real human being, and clearly a human being who had perhaps issues throughout his life and who had found a way of coping with quite a lot of life by telling himself stories and creating narratives about himself, which had perhaps never been challenged. And I think it was very interesting that your previous guest, who has been through their own experience of some kind of emotional distress and emotional trauma, it's very hard for other people to recognize what a strain that places on someone. And if you are going through such intense media scrutiny, you are the object of that scrutiny. Suddenly all of the stories that you've told yourself about yourself, the narrative that you have constructed, then gets blown apart, it gets picked apart, it gets analysed in the press. Where does that leave you? The structure you've created for yourself disintegrates and you don't have anything to hold on to. And I can imagine that as best I can to put myself in the position of someone like Jason Arday, he must have felt incredibly lost and incredibly overwhelmed without the normal ways of coping that he'd had, which was to create these narratives about himself, for himself, to give himself strength.
Yes, it's a very interesting thing. And just on the screen, we're seeing Andrew Neil's tweet, the veteran broadcaster, often broadcasts for Times Radio. I'm just reading this off the screen. He has reacted and said, "This is terrible news. Jason Arday has been found dead. I did tweet last week that he needed a compassionate intervention from family, friends, professionals, and not more abuse, that he was clearly a troubled person who needed help. Too late, so sad." Very interesting one as well from Dee, who is in Chesterfield, who says, echoing your points, I think, Lucy, when she said, when Dee has said, when Jason Arday's research and claims about his achievements were exposed to a sceptical public, he had to relinquish his self-image and did not know how to create a more authentic, realistic one. It must be bad enough when something you believe in and is genuine, falls apart for whatever reason, there's a cancellation, as Philip Kisley was talking about just a few minutes ago. That's stuff that is true, that he believes, his genuine beliefs, and then he was cancelled for that reason. When it comes with a construct, with things that were clearly false, that have followed you around, sometimes for years, and you're living what appears to have been a complete fantasy life, when that falls apart and you're exposed, that must be unimaginable for the human condition, Lucy.
It is unimaginable because it basically exposes your immense vulnerability. And of course, the irony is that every single one of us, all of your listeners and viewers to this show, to some extent, we create a narrative about ourselves. And a lot of that can include quite faulty thinking about ourselves. We might tell ourselves that we don't deserve love, or that we don't deserve success, or that we don't deserve abundance. We tell ourselves these stories, and then they become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this creation serves a purpose. It protects us from getting hurt. Our heart and our brains are very alert for finding ways to keep us safe and to keep us alive. And so the stories that somebody like Jason Arday, who I want to be very clear, I have never worked with, I've never met him. I'm coming at this story as green as anybody else, really, unless they dealt with him at Cambridge, that actually this was someone who had done what most of us do, but he'd done it to a much more florid degree. He had created stories about himself. They weren't challenged, and therefore, to some extent, I think he began to believe these stories about himself. And in fact, they were almost celebrated and championed, and they seemed to provide a pathway to the most extraordinary life. And it would be very interesting to know what Simon & Schuster, his publishers, are going to do now, because the book, I think, was actually published in, he's got an autobiography.
Yeah, it's out in America, I think, yeah.
In America earlier this week, and then presumably it was destined to be published over here. And it is very hard to imagine when you start to fragment in that way, and quite a lot of emotional distress is around this idea of, I can't keep the plate spinning any longer, I can't integrate all of the things I know about myself, and therefore I'm beginning to fragment. You don't have anything really to keep your soul together, to keep your body and soul together, and you will feel ultimately like you have nothing else to live for. I was so relieved that you stressed a lot of the time throughout your coverage of this very sad story how people ought to perhaps support themselves if they are feeling triggered, if they're feeling like they have been in are in a similar situation, that the Samaritans in particular are the most phenomenal organization who can be there for you at those times when you feel like you can't go on, you don't have any hope, and ultimately everything feels like it's unraveled. There is always hope. Even if you can't see it, someone else might be able to give you that sense of hope just by picking up the phone and talking to them.
Lucy, you're absolutely right. A member of my family was a Samaritan at one stage many years ago and did great volunteering work there. I have called them myself. We've talked before, and I've been very open about the fact that I've suffered from depression and anxiety. I'm mentioning this only because I am someone who have used the services of the Samaritans on 3 or 4 occasions. They are a fantastic organisation, and as Lucy says, if you are going through these issues, or you're triggered by this, or there's something that's on your mind as a result, I am always very grateful to all our viewers and listeners who view and listen to my programmes. But I'm just saying to people, if you are having these thoughts, you have permission to switch off. You don't need to watch and listen to this programme tonight. If you are having these thoughts, for urgent support, you can ring the Samaritans on 116 123. The number's free to call from both landlines and mobiles, and it's open every day of the year at every point, 24 hours a day. You can actually email them as well, which is something that some people do, or have live chats as well with the Samaritans. So there are lots of ways you can contact them. Elle has been in touch and says, I know how it feels to lose someone to suicide. My heart goes out to Jason's family. He was clearly a very troubled soul who simply couldn't cope with the fall from grace. What can we learn from this? Plenty. R.I.P. Jason. For now, I do wonder, I mean, someone has already mentioned Caroline Flack, and there are all sorts of allegations around what led to her suicide. I don't want to particularly dwell on that, but I do wonder where the line is, in your view, Lucy, certainly from someone who's dealt with high-profile clients. I know you have been, you've never mentioned any names, obviously, for obvious client confidentiality reasons, but I know you've been someone who has been a therapist to some notable people. I just wonder where the line is, you think, between, and I do think we do need to ask ourselves this as journalists, as commentators, as people who will have an opinion on just about anything because it's our job to do so. There is, I believe, very clear journalistic evidence, reason and responsibility when it comes to Jason Arday, when it comes to asking critical questions, when it comes to exposing these things. There is a person at the end of that story. There is a family at the end of that story. No one, not even the most critical voice of Jason Arday, would have wanted him to have been found dead and apparently, we don't know for sure, but apparently taken his own life. I just wonder, from your perspective, Lucy, as someone who is a commentator, also someone who works with people, has worked with high-profile people, when it comes to being at the centre of a storm, what is that like and how do you cope with it?
Being at the centre of such a public storm is incredibly frightening because, again, it feels like you are under the microscope of every single person, and that level of scrutiny and that sense that you are being looked at can feel so destructive. It is as if you have been destroyed by that gaze. It is so laser focused, and that's the pernicious dimension of social media and the parasocial relationship that so many of us have to people in the public eye. You don't have to be a celebrity or a VIP or someone who has fame because you're talented. You might just be at the center of a news story, and therefore unfortunately there isn't a straight line. I would agree with you that elements of this story were very important for journalists to explore, but the problem is that as soon as you uncovered what had really been going on, you then were taken into a completely different story, which was about a man's struggles to cope with reality, and at that point they become very much the story. So human beings are incredibly susceptible to shame and how terrorizing it feels if people know secrets about us or they know things that we have tried to keep hidden about our behavior or our personality. We dread that exposure that comes from being fully known. Even, dare I say it, in relationships, we're afraid that our partner might fully know us. We're afraid that people might, if they did know us, that they wouldn't like us, that they wouldn't love us, that they would reject us. And unfortunately, what has happened in this case is that a lot of the media scrutiny ended up being criticism, and therefore it ended up looking and was perhaps experienced by Jason Arday as a complete rejection of his entire being. And as a result, this is the only course of action that someone might imagine they have. If I've been destroyed,
yes, and that's an interesting point, actually. Patrick from Kent has sent me a message, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the final line is very telling in the context of what you're talking about there, Lucy. Patrick says he could never have been expected to manage such a fall from grace himself. What do you make of that?
I think that's absolutely spot on. It's a beautiful way of putting it. Apart from the fact that, was it really a fall? I mean, when I look at someone who has perhaps tried to deal with their emotional issues by creating a fantasy life, when that gets exposed, would we ever regard that as a fall from grace? The phrase is rather unhelpful because it gives the impression that somehow you can only be deserving of grace if you are somehow elevated, and that somehow when all of that is stripped away, you don't deserve our grace. Whereas actually what people in my profession would argue is this is the very time when people who have perhaps been stripped of their coping strategies and their belief in themselves, that's the moment at which they need our compassion the most.
Well, that is when Christian charity or whatever religion you adhere to should be employed. Listen, thank you, Lucy Beresford, the psychotherapist, life coach, author, and great friend of the programme. Appreciate it. Lots of people getting in touch. Elaine says, no doubt the tragic death of Jason Arday will be used as an excuse to crack down on media scrutiny, even though it was fully deserved, just to take the attention away from DEI. I wonder if the people who put Jason up on that pedestal are feeling any guilt at all. Ashton says, quite a sad state of affairs regarding Jason Arday. He appears to have been a fantasist, but he was manipulated and promoted by a system that wanted a poster boy. Mac in Glasgow says, very sad news about Jason Arday. Thoughts and prayers to his family. He clearly was very troubled. On a more general point, mental health is not a sign of weakness. It's being strong for far too long. God bless him and his family, says Mac. So that is Mac in Glasgow. There are lots of people getting in touch about this. There are some comments I am simply not going to read out if they are not respectful. You can send them through if you want to, you're very welcome to, but if it's not on the right side of the line, I'm not going to read them out because this guy has just died. Okay, so just going to be very, very clear about that. We're going to remain respectful. We're going to have taste and decency whilst discussing this very, very important issue and what it says, not just about a family's tragedy, but also about our society, about journalism, about academia, about diversity, equity and inclusion. Lots and lots of threads to talk about. We'll speak to a former colleague of Jason Arday in just a few seconds. I want your views as well in the next hour, right up till 10 o'clock now. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 9 o'clock. If you're expecting what just happened, that is not being broadcast this evening because we have extended coverage of the death of Professor Jason Arday, which has been announced just this afternoon. And about an hour ago, we broke the news that the former University of Cambridge professor has been found dead in Battersea in South London. A spokesman for the Metropolitan Police said officers were called by the London Ambulance Service at 12 minutes past 3 today. The spokesman said, sadly, a 41-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. His next of kin have been informed and are being supported by officers. At this time, his death is being treated as unexpected but is not believed to be suspicious. The case is being investigated by officers from the Met Central South Command Unit. A file will be prepared for the coroner. We remember that Professor Jason Arday resigned as a Professor of Sociology of Education at the University of Cambridge. That was on the 5th of August, so that was Wednesday last week that he resigned following accusations of plagiarism. In fact, there were many, many accusations that were made in regard to his story, in regard to his upbringing, allegations he had put in the public domain, or claims, more accurately, that he had been mute as a child. That was rubbished by people who'd been in primary school with him, that he had had autism, that he was neurodiverse. Maybe that was true. It's hard to know because there were so many claims and so many things that couldn't have been true. For example, that he had raised many millions of pounds for charity, done all these marathons, run an improbable distance, including with a hairline fracture in his leg. He was feted by so many people, by the University of Cambridge, of course, that made him an academic. There were many other universities that took his research, which seems to have been plagiarised. There was a book that was coming out in his life and many questions over how many claims within that were correct. So he resigned last Wednesday following all those allegations. He was the University of Cambridge's youngest ever black professor and one of very few black senior academics there. Last week, the historic university, I mean, it's obviously one of the best universities in the world, University of Cambridge, launched an investigation into Mr. Arday's appointment and tenure at the university. It's going to feed into a review of the university's hiring process for all senior academic positions. So many questions about whether Jason Arday should have been employed there in the first place, the quality of his work. The teaching has been criticised by his students, the marking, the supervision, the fact that he was supervising too many PhD students. There are loads and loads and loads and loads of claims about a life that he had created. It was all falling apart. Lots of media scrutiny, including by this station, as we were right to do and absolutely correct to cover this as a major story as it was. And then, of course, today, very sadly, he was found unresponsive at an address in Battersea in South London. We know that Jason Arday resigned just a few hours after the university announced this investigation, citing, as he puts it, or had put it, the unrelenting level of public scrutiny. Dr. Lisa Mackenzie is an academic and author who has worked with Jason Arday in the past. Lisa, thank you for joining us, especially at short notice on a Friday evening. This is horrendously tragic and dreadful news. What's your reaction?
I mean, I was listening to you, actually, Peter. I'm at my sister's house. We're having a barbecue. We've got the radio on. She's a big fan of yours. And you announced this. And to be honest, you know, I feel really heartbroken, actually. As I've said to you before on this show, he was actually a nice guy. You know, he wasn't a demon. He was actually a very soft, gentle guy. The problem that I see with this is the way that the universities have behaved, the way charities have behaved, the way that the people around him sort of reacted to him, perhaps not seeing that the things that he was saying was not true, and perhaps understanding that vulnerability, and instead encouraging, you know, this life that was false. And unfortunately, you know, when people start to, you know, they start to look into his life, they start to find things out about him, it was unraveling. And I feel deeply, deeply sad about this, actually, that somebody's life has unraveled this quickly. I think there's a lot of answers to be had here. And
I'm always, obviously, we're just, you know, we're reacting to this in real time here on this programme. It was less than an hour and a quarter ago that we got this news. There are lots of people very angry with Cambridge University here. And I do want to represent that anger. I do want to represent what our viewers and listeners are saying. Ian has been in touch from Essex, and I just want to hear your opinion, positive, negative, whatever it is, Lisa, on a couple of these messages. Ian says, this is down to Cambridge, treating him as a look at us, we have one of those. It's the woke culture coming home to roost. I feel so sorry for this man. The news reported it. Cambridge caused it, says Ian. Another person says the academic ruse was fueled by Cambridge University, so yes, this is their fault. I'm sorry, if it was nipped in the bud, this disaster wouldn't have happened, would it? Mick has also said from Dorset, those who built a fantasy are to take their fair share of responsibility for it. Now, I don't want to ascribe blame. I don't want to talk about blame when we're talking about suicide. If that is in fact what has happened here, we think it may well be. We know that if the police say something is not believed to be suspicious, what that euphemism means. I don't want to blame Jason Arday in any way. I don't want to ascribe any blame for someone taking their own life in whatever circumstances. If we talk more generally, Lisa, about this scandal and what the contributory factors are, maybe you could take those comments in that context.
Yeah. Well, that's what I've been doing since this story broke 2 weeks ago. You know, and I worked with him at the University of Durham. We were both employed actually on the same day. We both went through the same interview process actually. And since this story broke, my response has always been the structural issues around this, not about Jason Arday himself. It was about the way that the universities have gone down particular routes, the way charities, the way that perhaps people with power positions treat other people, you know, perhaps as commodities, perhaps as tokens, the way that people are built up and then very quickly knocked down if they're not who they say they are. So for me, this has always been a structural problem. It's still a structural problem now because a man, you know, as his life has unraveled in real time in front of the world. And, you know, there is a lot of people out there that's also blaming the press, but that's what press scrutiny does. And perhaps after this terrible, terrible situation, perhaps everybody who's been involved in this might really start looking at their own practices. We don't want to see this again. We don't want people built up beyond their own capabilities, people who might have mental health issues, people who've got learning difficulties, and then the minute that they can't live up, they're cast aside. This is what we don't want to see. So from day one, I've always looked at this as a structural problem. I've seen this in universities for a long time. I've seen the structural issues that happens in universities, in charities, in politics, the way that people are built up and then let go.
Lisa, we'll return to this story in just a second, but there's some breaking news from Buenos Aires in Argentina, and that is that the two missing Israelis, there's been a huge media coverage of this over many, many days. Mali and Lil Yahalomi have been located in Buenos Aires, and thank you to the viewer who sent that in to me. I just wanted to note that just very briefly. That is the breaking news that Mali and Lil Yahalomi have been located in Buenos Aires in Argentina, the two missing Israelis, and big controversy over that story. It would have been a big story for us on another night. I'm delighted that they have been found alive and well. Back to Jason Arday. You talk about those structural issues. There were people who wanted to believe his lies, weren't there? There were people who wanted to believe that this person who was, even if anybody had put together everything that he had claimed, I mean, some of it didn't make logical sense. Some of it was practically impossible when it came to, you know, the distances he ran, the amount of money he earned. If even basic checks had been done there, to say nothing of his academic work. I just wonder what you think it says about those structural issues, about the system, when you would imagine that Cambridge University, one of the best universities in the world, would check a PhD thesis.
Do you know what? Having worked in universities for 20 years, I would say that this was this was always going to happen. That the universities, you know, the universities they collect people. That's what they do. They collect people based on all different types of things. And if they've got somebody that they think is valuable to them in any way, and Jason Arday was valuable because he had a really good backstory. He was somebody that could tick lots of boxes. He's black, he's working class, he's neurodivergent, he's got lots and lots, I suppose, going for him if you're looking for a token to collect. That sounds awful. It sounds horrible, what I'm saying. But my experience working in universities, the elite universities do this. They almost collect people.
I mean, that is a dreadful indictment. I'm sure it's absolutely true, Lisa, and I thank you for sharing it and being so honest and straightforward, as you always are when you're on my programmes, and I really appreciate all the contributions you make and have made over many, many weeks and months. The point is, I think, Lisa, that is not what academia should be. That is not what our elite institutions should be. And my worry is that, you know, I don't know what was going through Jason Arday's mind today. I'm not going to pretend that I do. But what I do know is, as you say, this storm was coming. If it wasn't him, it would be someone else.
Yeah.
Because that is just so striking that you're saying that, because it used to be meritocracy in this country. It used to be, no matter what well, it should have been anyway, and often was, and should be. If true meritocracy existed, it wouldn't matter whether you're black, white, you know, male, female, whatever, gay, straight, whatever. It was just the quality of your academic work. But the fact is that so many universities and so many other elite institutions or just institutions in general will try to create this artifice, won't they?
Yeah.
And Jason Arday, through some fault of his own, some fault of others, was caught up in that, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I experienced this a little bit. Over 10 years ago, I wrote a book about living on a council estate, what it was like as a working class woman growing up and living on a council estate. The Guardian became very interested in me and, was inviting me to write for them. They liked the fact that I was a working class woman who lived on a council estate. The universities were kind of, working their ways around me, going, oh, this is a great story. We've got a working class one here. But the truth is I was probably just too angry and too outspoken for them. And that was the problem for me, is I became angry, I was outspoken, I didn't say the things that should and could be said. I said other things. And what I've watched over my 20 years in academia and in the media and in politics is that the people who are the gatekeepers want a specific type of person.
Yes.
And that's somebody who's grateful, smiley, kind, grateful, got a great backstory. This is awful what I'm saying. I'm saying something very awful, but this is what I've experienced, that people in elite positions are looking for tokenistic people, so they don't have to do the structural change. They can say that we've got Elisa McKenzie from a council estate.
Yeah.
They can say we've got Jason Arday, and they don't actually have to do the structural change then. And I feel
you're essentially solving the problem for them because of what they project onto you and say, well, you're from a council estate, therefore you must believe this. You're a black person, you must believe this. And the set of circumstances that you've come from define everything. I've seen it time and time again. I've seen it in broadcasting as well, and not in this station, but in others as well. Just 1 second, Lisa, because we have a statement from the Vice-Chancellor, the most senior academic at the University of Cambridge, Professor Deborah Prentice, who has said, "We are desperately saddened to hear this tragic news. Our heartfelt sympathies go to Jason Arday's family and friends at this incredibly difficult time." Lisa, I cut you off mid-flow there. You were about to say something.
That's fine. I mean, imagine being that person that Cambridge University, when we all saw it, because we saw the video that they made, where somebody says to you, you are the best in the world. And that was what the video said. That's what the piece said about Jason Arday, that he was the best in the world. No one can live up to that anyway. Nobody. But the fact that his backstory was not true, and that there were things around that around his backstory, around his appointment, that did not mean that he was the best in the world. There's a lot of answers actually here to be made. There's a lot of questions to be asked and a lot of answers. And I don't think anybody who's been involved in this story gets away with this, actually. I have seen this for a long time, as you have seen it as well. So when I'm talking about picking people out who are grateful, who are, you know, will say the right things in order to not make structural change, I think that will resonate with a lot of people.
Lisa, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for coming with, you know, quickly, and especially on a Friday night as well. And all the very best to you and to your sister as well. And thank you for speaking so honestly, searingly honestly, I would argue there, from Dr. Lisa McKenzie. Quite a number of messages are coming in as well. Robin says, Andrew Neil's comments, I fully agree with the broadcaster. We read out his tweet a little bit earlier on. Jason was crazy to an extent with cautious psychology, but I don't believe he was a bad person. The blame for this lies with the ridiculous, nonsensical and dangerous woke and DEI that is everywhere these days. Jason clearly did have talents and abilities. His fall from grace and resulting ridicule could have been turned around. As I said, he did have talents, and a very interesting story, very sad story now. Sean and Bister says, regarding Jason Arday, this tragic ending is the result of a person whose life was a lie. Maybe his family believed he was his alter ego. Just wait for the left-wing press to start blaming the right-wing press. I think that is inevitable. I think that's going to happen tomorrow, today. It'll be on social media right now, which I haven't been able to have a look at it. There are going to be people who will blame journalists for simply doing their job. And certainly we have a responsibility. Every journalist has a responsibility to do and to say things that are true, that are fair, that are reasonable. But I'm not going to stop people saying difficult things. Lisa McKenzie has said some difficult things there. We're going to have some callers on in a minute who are going to say some difficult things. And this is a tragic, horrendous event. My heart goes out to his family, to his wife and 2 kids. We've had a statement from the University of Cambridge Vice-Chancellor, Professor Deborah Prentice. She had said, we're desperately saddened to hear this tragic news. Our heartfelt sympathies go to Jason Arday's family and friends at this incredibly difficult time. That's exactly how I feel. That is exactly how I'm sure the vast majority of our viewers and listeners feel as well about Jason Arday's death. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't ask questions about how we got here, about the stories he told, about the lies he told, I'm afraid. And I know that's really blunt, and I know that's maybe a tough thing to say, but we're not going to shy away from that, because it has to be discussed, it has to be dealt with. And the big issues that Lisa McKenzie was talking about there, when it comes to our big institutions who want certain things to be true, well, there's a tragic inevitability, very sadly, about some of the things that then flow from that. Whatever you think, and please tell me if I'm talking nonsense, and that's okay, because on my programmes we disagree without being disagreeable. We always have, we always will. For the last 6 years we've done it. We'll hopefully do it for the next 6 years and beyond. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Sean in Edinburgh, who says, watching the Jason Arday scenario tonight and in the past few weeks has been really concerning. He's been caught out in the wrong place at the wrong time. He tried his best to cope, to be normal, but sadly it took its toll. Professor Arday and the likes of Caroline Flack were poster people, but should have never respected the various paparazzi and social media. Has this country ever learned from the Levison inquiry, says Sean in Edinburgh. Caroline in Norfolk says what Jason Arday did was wrong, but equally he was enabled by so many people in the organisations that should have helped him and not created this tragic story for their own gain. Debbie's been in touch and says, I disagree with Lucy. I'll go into that a little bit actually in future, but I just want to bring in Ebs Akintade, the social commentator who's with us now. Ebs, thanks for joining us in the studio.
Yeah, hello.
Dreadfully sad news that Jason Arday, the former University of Cambridge professor, has been found dead, found unresponsive at an address in South London this afternoon, pronounced dead at the scene. Spokesman for the Metropolitan Police said officers were called by the London Ambulance Service at 12 minutes past 3 today. Sadly, a 41-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. His next of kin have been informed and are being supported by officers. At this time, his death is being treated as unexpected but is not believed to be suspicious. The case is being investigated by officers from the Met Central South Command Unit. A file will be prepared for the coroner. What do you make of this?
Well, what I will first say is condolences to his family. I think it's been a torrent of negativity against him, the situation. He did. I was just going to read a quote that he said last week when he resigned. He said, "While criticism is an inevitable part of academic life, what I've experienced has gone far beyond scholarly disagreement. The relentless accusations, speculation and public commentary have taken a profound toll on me and on those I love." He said his resignation shouldn't be mistaken for an acceptance of the narratives that have surrounded him. So it's, it's been... The media itself have jumped on this story. It contains all the elements of using someone for their own agenda, and it's like taking EDI to a new level. There's a whole mix of...
Well, let's get into all of that.
Yeah.
So I know where you're coming from, but I'm gonna...
I think we talked about it.
We did talk about this previously, and I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But let me just lob something slightly back at you.
Go on.
Jason Arday used the media to his own advantage on many occasions to tell his story. He was someone who was about to publish a book, in fact it had been published in America, which contained this artifice that he had created, these lies that he had told. That is tragic. He is now dead, and the two are maybe linked and maybe not. But when it comes to someone who's so high profile, who's on, panels on BBC One programmes, who's giving talks all around the world, who's a professor at one of the best universities in the world, there's going to be scrutiny there, isn't there? And if that is built on lies, you can't really blame the media for doing their job, can you?
No, you can't blame the media for doing their job. But in the same way, I know Caroline Flack's name was mentioned, people do make mistakes. Yes, I'm not downplaying the mistake that he made. Plagiarism is a really serious thing, obviously. But I do think that the way these things can be whipped up to such a degree that it actually affects someone's mental health to the point where this happens, then you do have to question, you have to question how we deal with these situations. Do we hang someone out to dry? Is this a modern day hanging of someone and watching them be destroyed in public and literally pelting them with rocks until they lose their mind? And I feel like that's what's happened in this instance. I'm not in any way advocating what he did. What he did was wrong.
Sure.
He lost his job as a result.
Yeah.
Every single newspaper ran the story. We talked about it. It's been broadcast far and wide around the world. So you do have to question, is this the right way to handle these situations? Because at the end of the day, there is a human being at the end of all of this.
And I think, you know, there's merit in a lot of that, and I'm trying to be sensitive because, you know, 90 minutes ago we heard that the guy had died, and I don't want, you know, we're talking about, and I'm in this situation as well, I'm talking about myself here, we're talking about blame, when actually, when someone takes their own life, no one is to blame. It is not about committing suicide, which is something which I think people shouldn't say because it makes it sound like a crime when it's not. My point, I suppose, is, you know, was this a sort of public hanging kind of idea, a public square kind of idea? Who put him in the public square in the first place is part of what I think we need to examine here. I'm not discounting what you're saying. I'm simply saying that Cambridge University and lots of other institutions as well, Durham and various others, they wanted to believe his story, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. But they also used him as a, you know, everyone was trumpeting, oh yeah, he's the first black professor for Cambridge and this, that and the other. And it was like, there was I believe there was also that motive there to be seen, to be using the right kind of person to promote a face for this narrative. Well,
but they should have checked he was the right person. You know,
this
is the point, shouldn't they?
Of course, as there are checks and balances for people going for jobs. We know this, and that happens. But in this instance, I think, wasn't there something about him having almost like a clear run? When he went for the job, it was almost decided already that he'd got the job for reasons...
I don't know the detail of that, but I do know certainly that there are basic checks that you would imagine a university like Cambridge, one of the best in the world, would say, hold on a second, is there anything we need to look into here? What's the due diligence when it comes to appointing people as a professor?
Of course, and they've got a lot of questions to answer for, which they were answering before what's happened in the last 90 minutes. We know that there needs to be reviews, and I'm sure it'll be investigated and all of that. But because this has now happened, which has taken a whole different, darker turn, we've all got to ask ourselves, what is the right way for this to be handled? You know, we've all got a limit. We talk about mental health all the time, on and on, we bandy around mental health. But do we think about the person at the core of this? Do we think it's great to go on about it for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks? Is it great to be on the front pages for days and days and days and days? Is that the right way to handle a situation like this, which is plagiarism? Of course it's not great. We know that. But when someone takes their own life, I don't think we have, or there's a lot of room to answer for how we handle these situations. We've got to look very carefully and think about the person behind the story.
What do you think about what Ebbs is saying? I'd be really interested to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. If you're expecting to be watching what just happened, that show is now not on, obviously. We've extended our programme because of the very sad death of Professor Jason Arday, and we will be taking your calls in just a second. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. If you want to get your voice on the air, please do give me a ring. I'm here right up until 10 o'clock. Ebbs is going to stay with me, and we'll take a few calls in just a second. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mac in Glasgow has been in touch and says, thank goodness people are more accepting and understanding of mental health and the stigma is reducing. Mental health is increasing because of the stress of life. More young men under 45 take their own life because they're ashamed to ask for help. We need to be more educated on this, Mac. I totally agree with you. And I should say that if anybody is having suicidal thoughts or is affected by the issues that we're talking about, for urgent support, you can call the Samaritans on 116 123. This number is free to call from both landlines and mobiles, open 24 hours a day. And another one here from Steph, who says, the death of Jason is incredibly sad. My best wishes to his family. However, I do feel the system has lifted people like Jason Arday to believe they're greater than they actually are. This has gone on for decades in schools, where if you lose, you're still a winner. It's just not reality. It's time for a change for the sake of those with weaker minds, says Steph. Let's go to the phones. Ebs Akintade is still with me, I should say, and will chime in at various points. Alex in Cardiff is our first caller on this particular tragedy. Alex, thanks for the call. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter and panel. Yeah, firstly, I find this incredibly tragic. And having had psychosis in the past and being sectioned, I don't actually like Jason Arday was a fantasist. And when I was in psychosis, I believed I was something I wasn't. In some way, even though Jason Arday was a complete fantasist, he had built up this life and he believed what he wasn't. And in some ways, I think he started to believe the lies about himself.
When you are suffering from those kind of issues, and obviously we don't know exactly what was going on in his mind, and we have got to be careful about that, but you've experienced psychosis, Alex, and thank you for speaking so very openly and honestly about it. I just wonder, I mean, it's obviously very easy to believe those fantasies and those things that are coming into your head.
You do, absolutely 100%. But when you come out of psychosis, or in Jason Arday's case, the pack of lies collapse around you, that was his life he had built up. And that, and he would have been thinking rationally about his family. And and when I came out of psychosis, I felt very ashamed because I believed I was something I wasn't, and but I didn't feel I had much left in my life when I came out of hospital, and although I would never commit suicide because it's against my faith. There were moments I prayed for death, but I mean, there's just so many issues. I think I disagree with people saying about Talk and how it's being covered. I mean, this is the devastating consequences of universities putting DEI in front of the truth. And, it's the universities that have caused Jason Arday and allowed him to tell these lies.
Alex, I tell you what, just stay where you are just for a second. I see Ebs Akintade nodding his head to one of those points you just made. Just stay where you are. We'll take you down just for a second, Alex. I promise you I'll come back to you just in a second. But Ebs, just your reaction to what Alex was saying there, if you would.
No, well, the bit what he said about EDI and basically using someone because they are black. Okay, we're going to have the first black Cambridge professor. There was a whole other agenda being pushed. And as I mentioned earlier, he was put in place for what seemed to be, in spite of being interviewed and everything else, he was just like fast-tracked into that position. There was a narrative being spun by whoever was behind that appointment, and they didn't obviously do their checks and balances correctly in order to make sure that plagiarism was spotted beforehand. So there were lots of things that were just ignored for various other agendas, and all that's happened now, whether rightfully or wrongly, yes, he did something wrong, but it's not just him who's accountable. Other people are accountable as well.
I mean, can I just ask you, not that you speak on behalf of all black people everywhere, but isn't it incredibly patronising for someone to be given a job simply because of the colour of their skin or because of a characteristic they've had since birth? Or, I mean, I know my experience as a white man is going to be different to your experience as a black man.
Yes.
And I just wonder, have you been on the receiving end of it? Have you ever had something happen in your life because of DEI? I just wonder how amazingly patronising it must be.
Do you know, I think I work a bit differently because I think working in the media world, you know that you fulfil a particular characteristic for a particular role. So you'll be very foolish to think, oh, I've got this. You want to think, I've got this job based on my own merits. Of course you do, and that you've got a talent for that. But also, you want to be, you know that someone somewhere is going, OK, well, he looks like that, or he sounds like that, so we have to use him for this. Whether it's for voiceovers or anything else, you know that that's how it works. You fit a category in a box. And if you're happy with that, because of work or whatever else, you deal with that. But I think this has gone the other way, where it's like appointing someone just because of the colour of their skin and fast-tracking them through to be a tick-box exercise to look good and fulfil that EDI criteria.
OK. Alex, what do you make of what Ebbs has just said there?
Yeah, I think he's right. And, you know, I think Ebbs is brilliant. I think JJ Anisobi, you know, is fantastic. And then you think, you know, like Sir Trevor McDonald, you know, and these people all got, you know, by their own merit, and they didn't create the fantasy. You know, but I just see, you know, the university. We don't know all the facts, but like the universities have played a part in this, and if it turns out he has committed suicide, that there must have been failings. Andrew Neil had tweeted about his safety.
Yeah, and we read that out earlier from Andrew Neil, the broadcaster, saying that people needed to go a bit more easily on him. Alex, listen, thanks for your call and thanks for speaking so honestly about that. Very interesting message from Sally here. He says, my daughter has been plagued with accusations of plagiarism for several years. When looked into, it was proved not to be. She has been failed her qualification. She has not been awarded her bachelor honours degree despite having the grades to pass. My daughter tried to take her own life. I had well, I'm not going to actually read out just exactly what has been said here, but it talks about the method and when we don't broadcast that. But there is a description of how she attempted to take her own life. She's been hounded and hounded. This is all on the hands of solicitors at the moment, hence we can't name names, and Sally is a pseudonym. My daughter is a single mother of 3 and has lost her job through the mental health that this has caused. This is also under solicitors' remit. There are people in these universities, they get their teeth into someone, they're bullied very badly. It's very well people saying speak to the Samaritans, but when in that desperate situation you don't think about them. I'm so glad my daughter has had help and is strong to carry on now, but we as parents have lived through this bullying with my daughter. We know our daughter has not cheated. Her work is very, very good, as the university has said, yet they still accuse her. I'm so angry about Jason Arday feeling how he did and not being able to cope. Sally, not her real name, I want to thank you for that message and being so honest for that, and thank you. Let's speak to Martin in Cambridge. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Martin, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Yeah, I come from this as a sort of holistic sort of approach, really. I mean, I mentor young people in engineering. I'm involved in motorsport, and you have to, I mean, you'll potentially have lives at risk if you don't do your job properly. So you have to mentor these people and teach them in the right way. And my brother is a professor. So and he went to grammar school and one thing and another. And I know how hard my brother worked to get his professorship and all the rest of it. And it seems to me that certain things were cut short in this case. I don't know, but it seems that way.
Corners were certainly cut. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there should have been at the very basic level some proper checks of whether his academic credentials were there properly.
Oh yeah, I mean, my brother's written 6 books on post-war European, European politics and history. I mean, the books that he writes take probably 4 or 5 years to write. I mean, with unbelievable research, So you have to do that to become a professor. So from my perspective, what I've seen with young people, and I think it sort of encapsulates our whole society at the moment, is there's no resilience. Everything's built on sand. I mean, these kids go to university. They get the degree in whatever, and I call it the Adrian Newey starter pack. I mean, that brilliant design in Formula One. They wave it about and they think they're God's gift. And then the Dunning-Kruger effect kicks in, which is a fascinating thing where these people think they're brilliant and they cannot accept criticism.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that the whole society is a falsehood. We're pumping everybody up. It's like even on television, we have people on X Factor or whatever it is, and it's all a false narrative.
Yeah, it's all absolutely amazing and fantastic and brilliant when actually a lot of it is just very ordinary.
It's absolutely. But in engineering, you can't do that. Everything is fact, and you have to do things in a certain way. And I think that our education system, we need to go back to grammar schools, and we need to go back to technical colleges. Really, really bright people go to university and they get taught properly, and they get found out if they can't do it. I mean, my brother had to failed a student of his because they plagiarised, and this is why I phoned up. And they dragged my brother into the office and said, "You can't. You've got to give this person a mark." He said, "No, I'm doing this placement. How do you know that? It's my work. I wrote it."
Yes.
Anyway. So, but he didn't.
And that's ridiculous. If someone has plagiarised something, they should not pass. It is as straightforward as that. Your brother must have been very angry about that. Well,
he is, because you have all these solicitors and Christians who have been told all their life that they are the best thing. You've got grade inflation in A levels and stuff, and these kids don't know anything. I mean, the O levels when I did it are now A levels.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
GCSEs and A levels. I do, Martin. Listen, thank you for your thoughts. I really appreciate this, Martin from Cambridge there. Another few messages. One person says DEI needs to stop. Everyone needs to be given the same opportunities and chances. But the bottom line is about the best person for the job, regardless of anything else. The pressure of quotas imposed on employers has to be removed. Another person says, notice to commentators and parliamentarians, if you spend 3 years knowingly and willfully libelling half the world's Jews, you don't get to talk about witch hunts all of a sudden. Slightly off topic, but I think there is some sort of relevance there. And an interesting one here as well, just what we were talking about a second ago, Ebs. I do want to bring Kevin and Basingstoke in just a second. Kevin, I crave your indulgence just for another moment or two, because I want to put this point to Ebs from a texter who says, of course, this sad story does no favours to the black community, reinforcing the belief held by some that people of African heritage can only achieve high economic status as a result of preferential treatment. DEI, it's all about the poisonous fiction of the need to expiate white guilt. What do you think of that?
Oh, God. I think that's probably stretching it a little bit too far. But what I will say to that is, I don't necessarily disagree, but I will say that's probably stretching it to the extreme.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kevin, you've been waiting for a while. I do want to bring you into the programme, and let's speak to Kevin in Basingstoke now. Kevin, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for ringing 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say?
I think if he was white, Jason, being as big, I think it was used to stir up division, racism, and criticise DE, because it's a bad thing.
It's not a great line, Kevin. I do want to make sure you have your say. We'll try and get you back on the line in just a moment. I think Kevin has been critical of what we're saying, and I do want to hear from him, because on my programme we disagree without being disagreeable. We'll take a break now, try and get Kevin back on a better line. I will speak to him in a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You're with the Evening Exchange on Talk. We had a problem with the line to Kevin in Basingstoke. I think it's better now. Kevin, please go ahead.
Yeah, hopefully it's better. I think if Jason was a white man, this story would have never been as big. It was used to stir up division, racism, and criticism of DEI. Because DEI is not is a positive thing. It gives people the same opportunity. Because they don't.
Well, it doesn't give them the same opportunity. It gives them enhanced opportunities. Kevin, well, it does. Kevin, would Jason Arday have been a professor at Cambridge were it not for all those things you mentioned about the fact that he was black?
Well, it might have been used in the wrong way in this case, but on the whole, it's not. They've been experiments where they've sent out CVs, like 100 CVs from someone with a British-sounding name and some with a foreign black-sounding name, and the people with the black-sounding name don't get nowhere near as response as people with the white.
And that's factual, Kevin. I'm not disputing that for a second. My point is that you said that division and racism were stirred up by this. The fact is that Jason Arday was putting things in the public domain, a lot of things in the public domain, that simply weren't true, and a lot of that was based on his heritage and his colour.
Yeah, in this case, but it's like when there's a terrorism attack or a rape or a murder or something, or a stabbing. When they report it on the TV, I just think, God, I hope this person's not black, because if it is, the media will be all over it. It will be a massive story.
Okay, hold on a second, Kevin. I want to bring in Ebbs here. I want to bring in.
That's really interesting, Kevin, because I do think, obviously being where we are, I do sometimes, when you do hear a story, you go, oh God, I hope they're not black. I do personally think that as a black guy, because there is always a thing where it's going to be to the power of 3 if someone is murdered by a black man, they're going to really jump on it. I've thought that since I was a kid.
But that's not what's happening here, is it, Kevin? What's happening here is that you have someone who was in the position because people wanted to believe the stories he was telling, and a major part of the stories he was telling was about his heritage and about his skin colour, wasn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, but if there was equality, if people weren't discriminated against, this story would never have come about.
But Jason Arday would never have been in that position if there was equality, because his work wasn't good enough as an academic.
No, but this wouldn't be a story.
But he wouldn't have been in the position in the first place. The fact that but Kevin, you can't have it both ways. No, Kevin, you can't. Hold on, just listen to me for a second. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that the media or whoever or society is to blame for bringing him down because of the lies he told, whilst at the same time DEI and Cambridge and many other institutions wanted to believe those lies. Because it suited their narrative as well. You're not criticising that element of things.
No, but if there was equality, if black people were treated the same as white, we wouldn't have to have DEI, would we?
Well, no, and it would be marvellous if that was the case, but the fact is we live in the real world, not the world that people want to create. And if people have DEI or promote people beyond their abilities when it comes to the clear case of Jason Arday, well, then he's going to be criticised for that.
Most cases, they don't get promoted beyond their...
Yeah, and I'm not arguing that's the case necessarily, Kevin, but
sometimes things go wrong, and in this case it did, but on the whole, it doesn't go wrong.
Yeah.
DEI is a positive thing, and this is being used to criticise it, because people don't want equality for black people.
But surely, okay, you can say what you want to say about DEI more generally. Surely even you accept, Kevin, that this is a clear case of DEI not working correctly or as it should.
In this case, yes. But why do Reform UK want to scrap the Equalities Act?
What's that got to do with this?
That is because it protects people, protects minorities. Like
okay.
DEI.
All right, Kevin. I think you've had your say. Listen, thank you.
Yeah, I think Kevin was all right up until that, maybe the last couple of sentences, because I think he slightly lost his way there. But he is right that, this story wouldn't have been as big if Jason Arday wasn't a black guy. We can't ignore that. I know
it's a fundamental, and I agree with you.
Yes,
but it's a fundamental part of the whole story, isn't it?
It's a fundamental part of the whole story. Yes. And I understand your point with the whole EDI pushing. I get that. I know that. But if this would never have been as big if someone who was white had done what he had done, and we wouldn't have lost a life today.
OK, well, we can't know that. Philippa says, well, we can't know that that's necessarily the case. Philippa says Jason wasn't the first person to tell lies on his CV and telling lies about himself. The media blew it totally out of proportion. Don't go blaming the university for not vetting him properly. That happens as well. He was hounded, and if he was mentally unwell, that would have been unbearable. Philippa, I have great sympathy for people who have mental health problems. I'm someone who suffers from mental health problems myself. But it wasn't just telling a few porcupines in a CV. It was a lot more than that. And it was someone who used the media to build up the narrative about himself. So I think if you're going to criticise the media, you've got to do it from all angles. Let me see if I can fit in 2 more calls. Joan in Sunderland. Hi, Joan.
First of all, I'm saddened to hear of the death of Jason Arday. And I am fed up of DEI. Surely it should be on your ability, not your colour, your creed, your sex, or whatever. Just take 2 points. The RAF was saying whites need not apply. West Yorkshire police say white need not apply. So why are they saying that? Surely it should be on your ability and on your ability alone. Don't tick your box to say, we've got too many white people, we haven't got enough black, or we need some women. We need somebody 6'7". No, we don't. It's all wrong. It should be on ability alone, and this problem would not arise.
Okay. Joan, thanks for your points. Really appreciate that. That's Joan in Sunderland there. Greg's in Edinburgh. Greg, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi there, Pierre. No, when I heard this news there just recently, you know, I felt really quite sad, but also very angry. Angry that someone, this poor soul, I'm presuming, has been driven to take his own life, but he's been exploited. He's been exploited by the individuals within an organisation and the organisation for itself. I mean, surely it was clear that if they'd taken the due diligence and looked into his history properly, that if he wasn't mentally ill, then at least there were signs that he might have had a personality disorder.
Greg, a lot of that is really, really interesting stuff. Let me just get a quick word from Ebs Akintade, if I can, before the top of the show. We've got about 2 minutes left. We'll come back to you, Greg. You were agreeing with what Greg was saying there.
Yes, I was. A lot of what he said, I absolutely agree with.
Exploited? Do you think exploited is
Yeah, he was exploited as a face, as, oh, he's a black face, we can get a black professor in, let's not do the checks and balances, let's just get him fast-tracked into that position. This looks good for him, it looks good for us, it looks good for everyone. And forgetting that if you don't do your checks and balances, we can only speculate, we don't know about his mental health, and if that had played a part in him plagiarising, we don't know. But what I will say is that there was a level of exploitation there from his seniors who put him in that position. Okay. Because to be a Cambridge professor, I imagine, is a very rigorous thing.
Well, but it should be, but was it, is the question, and the inquiry's looking into that. Greg, I'll give you the final word on this. What do you make of what Ebbs has just said there, Greg, in Edinburgh?
With them, it's just very quickly. I've had experience as a supervisor with 2 people I was supervising over the course of many years ago, particularly a young black guy and a young gay guy, both of who were being put forward as some sort of performing bear by the organisation that I was working for. As I look at this, we've got ourselves a black guy, we've got ourselves a gay guy, and it was shocking then, and it's appalling now that this has led to this young man taking his life like this. It's really sad.
Greg, thank you for your call. A lot of common sense spoken there. Thank you to all the callers, texters, tweeters. I'm sorry I couldn't get everybody on, and a huge thanks to Ebbs Akintade as well, the political and social commentator who has been with me for the last